Welcome to the first episode of Who Made This? It's not a rhetorical question. Actually, what we're doing is giving you a behind-the-scenes view of the people who make your favorite products and experiences. This one is going to be quite a fun trip down memory lane if you're a major sneakerhead. We have one of the original sneaker legends, Larry Selbiger here. Key, Piva, and One. If you remember and One, it's going to be a good one for you. So let's go.
Yeah. So like maybe before we even get into like the design aspects, can we just kind of take like a little sip? But like where you from? Where'd you grow up? And then like how did you kind of get into design?
What did young Larry want to be when he grew up?
Yeah.
Young Larry, when he grew up, he wanted to be a marine biologist.
Oh,
That
you
kind of
coastal
stuff.
then where you grew up is like by the coast or?
No, I grew up in northern Jersey,
Okay.
about a half hour outside of New York City, which was always nice. Could go into the city pretty easily.
Yeah.
But since I wasn't that great at science in school, but I could draw, I decided to see what I could do to make a living drawing. My art teacher in high school said that I should pursue it.
Yeah.
Back at the time when you're in high school and you have a hot teacher, you listen to her. So my best friend and I, we both decided to go into the art field, and he still has a functioning business now back on the East Coast called Scrambled Eggs Productions.
Whoa, I love
a lot
that.
of toy design, and I did some work for them over the years. But once I got out of high school, I went to Syracuse University and found out about industrial design. Didn't know it existed. I was going to be an illustrator, and when I found out that I could build these cool models of things and learn to draw really well, I decided that was the profession that I wanted to pursue.
Dude, yeah.
And my first job out of school was so I went from Wayne, New Jersey to Seattle. I worked for a company that was
Clear across.
clear across the country. My dad said, go, if you don't like it, come back home,
Yeah.
but go. And I never looked back. It was a great opportunity. I worked for a company called Walter Darwin Teague Associates, WDTA. They worked for Boeing. Basically, they did the interior design work for Boeing. So I had the opportunity to be an illustrator. At that time, did these big 18 by 24 inch gouache. Do you guys know what gouache is?
Yeah.
Gouache
Yeah.
paintings of airplane interiors.
Is that like a thicker gouache or would it?
It's an opaque watercolor,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
and it's very temperamental. If it got splattered with water or anything, you'd see all the water droplets and everything else. So you had to really work the wetness all the way across and not go back when you did paintings that way.
You couldn't hit Control-Z.
You're using a toothbrush and doing spattering and doing stuff with your paintbrush and doing all kinds of things like that, masking things off. We used airbrushes. Now we just use Photoshop. Actually, now we just let the computer do it. But that was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. I was only there for about 9 months because I wanted to get involved in design work. I really didn't want to be just an illustrator since that's what I went to school for. So I left them. Actually, I did the opportunity to work on one of the presidential planes that they were working on at the time. So I got to do cutaway of the airplane as a big painting, showing all the little coach seats and conference rooms. Other people had these paintings that, like, I've never seen people paint like this. They would do a painting of a conference room and make the tabletop burled wood, and it looked like it was exactly that. I mean, these guys were phenomenal painters that they had in there that did that kind of work. So I learned a lot better ways of handling a brush when I was with those guys, but it wasn't really what I wanted to do. So I left there to go work down in Portland for a company called Avia.
Wow.
Back in 1987.
Were they relatively new at that point, or had they been pretty established?
They were still fairly new. They were just really getting going. They were really just getting going within the industry. Jerry Stubblefield, who started the company, was trying to sell his idea for the cantilevered outsole, which was basically a bottom that had this concave opening in it, and you basically would land on the outer parts of your outsole, the inner part being more hollow, which allowed these parts to give you your cushioning.
Whoa. That's
It
incredible.
worked really well, but it wasn't that aesthetically pleasing. Nike wasn't interested. So Jerry said, fine, F you, I'm going to start my own company. So he did. And at first it was very difficult because Jerry's kind of like, he's just an inventor, a guy with a lot of ideas. He wasn't very business savvy from that standpoint. So he had to hire in some people that could run the business, and he could then create the product. At that time, they hired me and another young gentleman that they hired. Actually, James, who they hired before me, was just doing draftings for them. Jerry had hired him to draft outsoles and stuff. And he'd come in, there would be James sitting there doing these little chicken scratchings. And Jerry would see, and it's like, hey, that's not too bad. Maybe we should make that. And so pretty soon he went from just a drafter to doing design work for them. And then they hired me. So it was basically just James and I in the beginning. And then we hired a whole bunch of other people. Some people that I knew from college, some people that I didn't know. And I stayed there for about 3.5 years. Then they sold the company. And actually, before they sold the company, there was a gentleman that came in to run the design group. And none of us really got along with him. everything kind of had to go through him to get to the people that you had to work with, and so it created a bottleneck that a lot of us didn't care for, so a lot of us left. And at that time when I left, I decided to go off and try to do my own business. I called it Selbiger Design back then, and I did that for probably 7 or 8 years. During that time, I had gotten married, and then I was getting divorced, so I decided, maybe I should get a full-time job. And I had been doing some consulting work for Nike during that time, and they were basically saying that if I had to give up all of my other footwear clients that I had if I was doing footwear for Nike, because they basically hired myself and another gentleman to just do all their kids' footwear. So we would go around to all the designers and go, hey, what are you working on? Okay, which shoes do you, okay, can I get a sample of it? And I would take it and I would have to simplify it and draw grade school, preschool, toddler, and sometimes even a crib booty, for that shoe that they were going to promote and do as an adult. So that was a lot of fun, but you always were kind of behind the 8 ball because you had to wait for all the adult designers to finish what they were doing, and have the company decide what shoes they wanted to take down, and to what level.
Wow.
So that was pretty busy, but I did that for 2.5 years before I took a full-time job with them, and they were like, yeah, well, you can do a lot more than just kids footwear. Why don't we hire you? And I was like, yeah, I could use a full-time job at this point. So I ended up taking a full-time job with them.
This is like in the 90s, like early 90s or late 80s?
This was in the early 90s.
Oh, wow.
Actually, mid-90s. Because I worked for Nike for 5 years.
Okay.
From 95 to 2000. Almost 2001 when I left.
What was the culture at Nike like back in the 90s compared to, like, obviously now it's such a juggernaut?
Back then, it was... the Meehan building wasn't even built. We were in the Jordan building. It was a lot closer knit. People seemed to... there was still always competition between certain designers and certain divisions. Basketball was always kind of put up at the top of the chart of things. So people were always kind of wanting to see what they did that way. But people really got along, except for management at times. They're big companies, there's always a lot of politics that goes on. So there was a fair amount of that at times. Mainly, you had people that had come into the company from a marketing standpoint that could tell you, didn't really know about design, but they would tell you if they liked it or not. So we call Romans. They would just come in and go, nah,
yeah,
do some more drawings. Or they go, yeah, that'll be really cool. No rhyme or reason for why they didn't like stuff or did like stuff. Right. So there was that kind of turmoil, I guess you'd call it, or underlying stuff that would go on where made people a little bit like, okay, I went to school to design something. I know what I'm talking about. Here's why it should be done. If you don't like it, that's fine. But explain to me why so that I can create something better. And that didn't really happen.
Yeah, some notes.
Yeah, some notes. What's happening in the market that tells me that blue is really not the color we should be using, or why we should be using straighter lines versus curved lines. So that was always a problem. I think at Nike, when you have people in different positions that had a different level of clout, I guess I would call it, for what gets done or what doesn't get done, they typically had more pull and authority than you did.
Right.
Even though you're the one designing it. So that part of the culture, I think, probably still exists today. But the one thing I think did exist then that made it a lot of fun as a place to work was the facility was fantastic. You could work out there, you could eat there, you could basically not have to leave if you didn't want to.
Everything but sleep, right?
Yeah, everything but sleep.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, they didn't care if you worked 16, 18-hour days. So at one point, you just had to decide, at least I did, when I left the company, that it was time to go work for a smaller company. I wanted to have a little bit more control over what I was doing and impact in a way that I would feel better about versus having to deal with the hierarchies of so many people as a big corporation. Back in 2001, I left to go join And1. Had called some people at Nike to get some people to come interview, and I was one of them. And as soon as I interviewed with them, they basically wanted to hire me, and same thing with the other couple of designers that I worked with. And we decided to all leave and go start with And1. And that was in 2001, and we stayed there till 2007 when the office got closed because they got bought by a shoe company down in California called, can't remember the name of the company.
We'll put it in the subtitle or in the write it in later.
It was a company that the guy who owned the company was called Jerry Turner, and they basically wanted to make cheap footwear and make lots of money.
Yeah, okay.
And so he bought And1, and all of us that worked there, we all left. So back in 2007, I decided to go back off and be my own boss again, have my own company. And during that time, I did some part-time teaching at the Art Institute and found that I could get a lot of different clients, some of which was fun. Outside of footwear, I really wanted to push myself and see what else I could do, so I got involved with Bushnell. and got a chance to do a series of rangefinders for golf for them. So that was a lot of fun. But most of what I've done for my career has been footwear. I would have to say it's been very lucrative. I've thrown away and drawn more shoes that I care to think about. Some things you make and you have ideas for that don't ever go anywhere, like this guy. When I was at And one of the things that we were trying to develop was two different lines of thinking for two different types of consumers. Some consumers were very much into new technology, the bling, I guess I would call it, that we have in footwear from that standpoint. Others were more interested in something a little more traditional, a little bit simpler, nicer leather.
Yeah.
Versus synthetics. So we had, I probably should have looked this up before I came in today. I'm trying to remember what it was, but one was for, like I said, more traditional, and one was more for more synthetic and fancier stuff. So we were trying to do stuff with nicer leathers, special perfing, seams out.
It's beautiful.
We never made it because after we did it, they didn't like the idea of the seam out. We made a shoe similar to this, but some of the ideas that were in here didn't make it. So there's a lot of stuff that you come up with that you try that never goes anywhere. But then there's some stuff you do that you do very quickly. I'll use this sample here from Teva. I basically designed it over a weekend.
It's awesome.
Gave them the drawings. In the following week, they made the samples. The only thing we changed on it was, like I was explaining to you before, we took the toe loop out and we did a 4-foot strap like this guy, which zigzags across. So it went from the toe to the side and back again to make it a little bit better. And that's how this sandal went into production, was with a different strap across the toe. But I've always found that when you get to design something in a short period of time and you have not nearly as many people getting involved in going, I don't like this or I like this, the product comes out better in a lot of cases because it's a little more pure. I think that's a good way to put it, because you have less people meddling with it. Not to say that's always a bad thing, but in a lot of cases when you have too many people, everybody wants to leave their thumbprint or their mark on the product.
Yeah.
And then the design gets very watered down, and who knows what it actually can look like or function like when you have too many people. So I always liked practice that went faster and had less people involved. We hit price points. We did things that we know we were supposed to do when we're trying to develop it, but without all the headache.
When a product doesn't get taken to market, is that like soul crushing, or can you just kind of like take it with stride and be like, okay, I'm gonna carry some elements to a future design, like maybe not the whole shoe is good, but parts of it I can pull over to other stuff.
Yeah, there's a lot of times when you work on something that doesn't get accepted by the corporation or the people that you're working with to go into production that you can pull from. As an example, back before Nike had done a lot of shoes that had EVA foam and stuff in the tongue and on sides of the shoe that had openings in it that would allow it to breathe. We were doing that back here. This whole, like in the case of this footwear, this sample, the whole tongue was a piece of EVA foam that was die cut, and then it had just an open mesh over the top of it, and it basically created openings in between your laces, and where the laces were, it had foam going across it. A little hard to see. We'll have to show a close up of it.
Yeah.
But that allowed, where so much of the heat gets formed on your foot, on the top of your foot and the bottom of your foot, allowed a lot more heat to escape out of the shoe.
Wow.
Because it was a lot more open over the tongue. But you had enough padding in areas that didn't, so it didn't cause any other kind of lace pressure. So we were able to take stuff like that and bring it forward. But to answer your question about soul crushing, as a designer, whether you're designing shoes, cars, watches, phones, computers, there's always going to be a certain amount of your emotional body that you put into it, because that's how we create. It's from our emotional drive. So when stuff doesn't get accepted that you make, it takes a while to get over the hump of feeling bad. That you start going, am I just a bad designer? I thought I knew what I was doing here, but nobody likes this. And I think I told you guys this when we were teaching stuff. As a designer, you kind of have to get a thicker skin, because everything you do is not always going to be liked. And just because it wasn't liked doesn't mean it wasn't good. There could be other reasons, whether it could be too expensive, it could be just the wrong timing. It could be that it needed to be a low top versus a high top. There's a lot of things that can come into play that can make or break the product before it goes into production. So you have to really kind of take that into consideration and try not to take it so personally. If every product you're working on, for a year, and at Nike, you typically in most cases would have 3 projects. So if you worked on 12 projects for the year and none of it made it into production, you would start to feel pretty bad about yourself.
Yeah.
About the quality of what you're doing, not really understanding why it's not coming right. But you can also bounce back from that. But it would definitely, if you go too long a period of time where the stuff that you're doing doesn't get accepted and work, the company's going to let you go. So you have to find a way to work with the people that you're trying to develop the product with have the right philosophy and thinking in mind so that you can create something that's going to be accepted and get into the marketplace.
Okay.
But yes, it can be soul crushing. Yeah, but that's part of how we mature and how we understand ourselves as a designer and how to get past that. It's imperative to understand that you know just because you did something that didn't get accepted doesn't make you a bad designer. It just means that wasn't right for the time. I mean, these two shoes that I brought in that I found from right before I left Nike, working for cross training, they never made it into the marketplace. But when I was working on them, everybody that I was involved with, they loved them. They were like, "This is going to be great." And then I left the company before they were going to get accepted into the product line or production, and I had to leave. I was lucky enough to have these two samples because most of the time when you leave a company like that, you don't really get to take much. But it was a lot of fun. It was very different design language and thinking for other products that I worked on, and I was feeling pretty good about them. So when I left the company, then they didn't do anything with them. I felt bad. But you have to let it go and move on to the next thing. You know, and then I got a chance right away to work on this shoe for And1, which became a pretty big hit for them at the time.
When you're in that space where like maybe something's failed that hasn't been picked and you put a lot of energy into it, you know, besides the thick skin thing, what was kind of your thing that you've always done to go and recharge and kind of get your energy level back up to where you felt confident and inspired? I mean, your company was called Inspired in Design. Like, how did you get back inspired where you were in that positive headspace to create again without the blocks and the doubts and whatnot?
Yeah, you know, everybody's creativity and inspiration comes from different sources. I think most of us like cars, and for me, I always wanted to look at fine art just to see how people create from a color standpoint, from a composition standpoint, all of what they were doing. So I would look at fine art, and then I would look at car magazines. I would also try to get out and go to a show, do something different to get out of the environment, just to kind of clear my head. I would go visit stores, whether it be footwear, clothing. It's always great to go to the BMW dealer, stuff like that. Mercedes, you can go sit in the cars and look at just how they did some of the fine details for on the dashboard or stitching in places. And when you see stuff like that that's been well executed, it makes you feel good, and you think, I could do that. I mean, when I was younger, it had just the opposite effect. Sometimes when I would look and see how good some people were at how they would paint, it would make me depressed. Like I could never be that good. But I had a teacher that would say, there's always going to be somebody better than you, and there's always going to be somebody just as good as you, and there's always going to be people worse than you. Mm-hmm. She says, so if you're always looking up the ladder at people that are better than you, and you're thinking, I can't climb the ladder, of course it's going to be depressing, and you're never going to feel good about what you do. So I always found it very beneficial and positive to go, okay, let me look back at where I've come from and what I've done to date. Because not all of it's good, but not all of it's bad either. And so I start to pull out those things that I did that, I really, that was really good. It was fun. I mean, I know it didn't get into production or whatever, but I had a good time doing it, and it felt right. So just knowing that I did do some things that were good from where I came from, and I've been evolving from my design language, from my skill set, that I would, kind of just put that in my backpack and go, okay, you got some things to work with. Don't just look at the negative side, look at all of it, and then go look at the things that inspire you. Like I said, I would go to automotive dealers, I would go to car shows, I would go to different stores. If there was going to be a show to go to where there's new outdoor show, outdoor retailer.
Oh yeah,
I used to go to a lot, and just look in the different industries and look at what people are doing. What are they doing for backpacks, or what are they doing for sleeping bags right now? Look at that cool fabric. Look at what they've done with the zipper details. Look at those things, and those kinds of things would inspire you. And I would take some pictures, or I'd take some notes and log that away so that when I have to do my next project, I could then, start to pull some of that stuff out. Okay, can I use any of this based on how I want to think now for this new project and what the brief's telling me that we're going to try to go after? If it's something that's supposed to be really lightweight and durable, but we want to be able to slip in and out of it. In the case of something like this, we just have a 4-foot strap where you really needed to have connection to your foot. And then back on the inside here, because of the shape of our Achilles tendon, you can't really see it, but you'd have to feel it. We've created some pods right around where your open spaces between your Achilles tendon and your ankle bones to keep your heel into the shoe. You can just feel the deep pocket that was put in there.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just little stuff like that was like, okay, it's not visual, it's a fun thing to kind of find out about, but you start to try to utilize those things and try to find a way to get yourself inspired again. As I've gotten older now, and I don't do as much design work, I don't have as much inspiration to create like I used to, but I'm starting to find my way back to that. It's been a couple of years now since I've done a lot of product creation, and I'm getting more back into my fine art, and I have to find the things that imagery that inspires me to create something or have an idea for something. And I've got a few ideas mulling around in here, so we'll have to see how that starts to come out on paper.
Well, it's cool to hear that you wanted to be a marine biologist, and now your some of your fine art painting is like marine life, like aquatic life, right? Like,
Yeah, I have. So I spent a few years ago. I spent some time with my 3D program, and I created a whole bunch of dolphins and manta rays, which I've created a bunch of imagery and stuff from. But now I want to try to take that same thinking and go back to just the fine art and just draw and paint that way and not do it in 3D. Not to say that was bad. I really love what some of that stuff looks like. I can show you guys because I have some of that stuff with me. Yeah. But that's definitely my passion now is to just create imagery that makes people feel good to look at or feels good to create.
The marine biology thing, I was looking especially at the and one stuff. It has like a very organic flow and the colors and the shapes. Like, were you looking a lot of marine biology, kind of what your interests were when you were designing the and one stuff?
Nope, not at all.
Well, take us through, like maybe this shoe, like what were you looking at that made you have those lines and stuff?
Yeah. So this shoe, as an example, we had a couple things in mind that we were trying to go after as a design and a focus for basketball. One was because of how we shoes fit around our foot and we flex our foot, we really wanted to find a way to make the foot work a little bit easier, to have the foot be able to flex in the shoe in an easier way. The thought was to have nothing across that part of your foot.
Like at that pivot point?
Right, at that pivot point, which is right at the base of the laces, and you can kind of see where it starts to crease. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, if there's nothing there, what the hell do I do? We're not going to put anything there. So I started to think about what it is that keeps our foot in the shoe. You know, if we're playing basketball and you're cutting side to side and you've got a height for your ankle, sorry, keep it on the microphone.
That's okay.
What makes sense to me and what spots on the shoe do we really want to focus on to have really hold your foot into the shoe? It's not really down here at the base of the U-throat. Most people don't need a lot of tightness down there. They want it to just fit so they can flex their foot. So I went back to thinking about what are the things that I really enjoy doing that encompasses my foot still and has to hold my foot in place. So at that time, I was still a skier. I wasn't snowboarding. And I thought about what are the two most important buckles in your ski boot to keep your foot from coming up inside your boot. And it was basically in these two parts of the shoe, of the boot. It wasn't your buckle that was down further. It wasn't the top buckle. It was the two that were one across part of the midfoot and just up past where the ankle's flexing. So I took that thought and created this design.
Wow.
So since we wanted it to fit well, let's make that just be the focus of the shoe. Yeah. Keep everything else open so it'll flex to where it wants to, and then we have a design language on the shoe that gears itself towards where you want it to fit really well. It was a very difficult project to begin with, to find the right TPU material that we could. This was before we were doing any kind of thermoplastic welding to synthetics and anything else. This is buffed and glued piece of TPU to leather.
Wow.
And it's a leather. It's not a really good leather. It's leather that's got a coating on it, so the surface could buff off pretty easy. The biggest problem was trying to find the right way to notch it in the back so that we basically could have this piece still be molded flat, because we weren't doing any three-dimensional moldings at the time. Right. These pieces are just molded out flat and then glued onto the shoe like a flat pattern. Yeah. So, and you can kind of see if you look really close where it kind of starts to pucker right through here. But that was since it was flat and had to wrap around the heel. We were able to create a shape in order to be able to wrap it that way and still have it glue onto the shoe. And since we had two pieces, we had to have a little seam down here at the very base for the two pieces of plastic, because one's a heel piece, one's the forefoot piece. But this shoe they did in a lot of different colors. And who were we talking about earlier? The basketball player?
Kevin Garnett?
Yeah,
Kevin Garnett.
Yeah.
Kevin Garnett wore it
at
the time, and I just remember it did really well for the company. The company was all very excited about the fact that they had hired us to come in from Nike and do design work for them. And then we had to do a new version, the follow-up version for the following year. And while we were in the middle of that, they sold the company. So that product, and actually the product that I came up with at that time, had too much plastic on it, and it didn't come out that well. So they never made that one. But this one sold a shit ton for them. Made a lot of money for the company. They were all very excited that the company was in the place that it was. But the owners just took all that money and then sold the company. But it was probably one of the faster design projects. I only did a couple sketches, but the initial sketches came out great. Everybody really liked the idea of the graphic. I mean, my original sketch was done as a blue shoe with white straps, and just that graphic really struck everybody. And, just kind of the way this stands out. It was kind of colored like that. And the person that I worked on with it was somebody that I worked with as a developer when I was at my first footwear company, Avia, back in the late 80s. He was also working for And1 when I hired on. He was a consultant developer at the time, and he and I had, since we had worked together at Avia, worked on that shoe and got it to come together. But that was a big one.
Beautiful. I do a lot of similar things now with my products, where you use like an anchor point and then you stack materials to build compression or like rigidity in certain points. I use it off like compression shorts and things like that when I'm making stuff. So that idea of using like the buckle to like anchor it to this part of the foot totally makes sense.
Yeah, and it was really a very simple idea, because one of the things that's always talked about in footwear is, is it midfoot fit? Is it forefoot fit? Is it ankle hit? What are you going to do for basketball, for ankle rollover? Or how you can make it flex easier from a material standpoint. So it was really good to be able to just take that thinking from one industry that I was very much involved in since I've been a kid and apply that to here and have it come out in a way that people really gravitated to.
Kind of starting out early in the footwear industry, you've obviously gravitated or evolved through like analog into digital. Now everything is so much pivoting to AI. What's your kind of thoughts on AI in the design world today as a tool or whatever? Yeah, because you're so traditionally rooted, and that's like the opposite spectrum.
I look at my career and my skill set like this. When I started off, I was just drawing, and I would use my markers to color stuff in and render it that way. And I was able to bring my drawings to life to a certain level with markers and pencils and
in a very real sense, bring them to life.
In a very real sense. I could use my markers and my shading and with what I was doing that way and make it very much look like what we see here on the table. However, at a certain point in my career, Photoshop became something that was a tool in the industry. And so now what we call AI, back then we were calling computer-aided design. It was utilizing new technology to do the same things that we were doing manually, but in a way that was more efficient and could give us a better output. But when I learned back in the day, I actually had an airbrush and a compressor, and I would actually do big cartoon characters on nursery walls with my friend and I, for people. And so I knew how to use a traditional airbrush. And so when I got Photoshop, it was like, wow, I don't have to smell paint. I don't have to hear my compressor making noise.
Right.
And it looks like I want it to in that sense. So when I started learning how to use that tool, it changed the way I designed. Because now I had a way to visualize what I was thinking in a way that looked more realistic than what I could do with just my paper and markers. Utilizing Photoshop from a texture standpoint and a shading standpoint and detail standpoint made things come to life that much more. However, the computer still couldn't do it. I had to have the skills to utilize that software to make my stuff work and come to life that way. Now it's taking that whole idea and in a lot of respects. So let me step back for a second. For me personally, I have not explored or touched any AI system. And the reason I haven't is I look at it and I think, wow, you could just take a little tiny chicken scratch of something, feed it into Midjourney or one of the other programs, and it's going to give you a 3D rendering of something that looks tremendous. Wow. It may not be able to be produced the way it's created, but it's going to give you the visual impact that most people, it takes a certain amount of time to learn the skills to be able to create that visual drawing for somebody to look at. Where now, it can be done in some cases a matter of minutes. And so for me, I've seen some people like Scott Robertson. I've seen some work of his where he's got a really nice sketch, and then he's had Midjourney or one of the other programs do a rendering of it. So the creative input is all there. And the computer is basically doing the Photoshop rendering or alias rendering, making it in 3D for him. And it cuts the amount of time that takes out of your design process is tremendous. Yeah. So utilizing it as a tool, if you've done the creative work for it, letting it render that for you can be very beneficial. A lot of people didn't like to spend the time with an idea and spend that much time drawing it to have it come to life like that. However, so I think utilizing AI that way is very beneficial, and I think it has a good place. However, what I see a lot happening with things that I see people posting from a drawing standpoint or ideation standpoint, I'll call it, is I don't always know what the input is they're putting into the system to allow it to do this, but it's generating multiple ideas and variations on their thought. And for me, I go, well, where's your creativity?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's taking away your creativity. I mean, you have a thought, but then you're just letting it do its thing to create from that. Not that that's bad, but I think about the whole aspect of, well, where is your creative input to it? Is it just, the idea and letting it run wild with it, or are you really developing that creative idea in your own mind, ways you might want to do it, and then letting the computer render it for you?
Right.
I could see finding the right happy medium for people, but right now I see it as a crutch in a way that people are utilizing that's probably not beneficial. When I see it being used where it's just generating lots of ideas and people are not giving much of an input to it in terms of what they want it to be, I could see that when it's like, well, then you don't really need people.
Yeah.
The computer, you could put just words in as an idea and it's going to draw stuff. So as a creative person that's drawing or building and making things, I could see it as a problem. Utilizing AI too much. I could see it as a positive when you're giving it the input of kind of what you want as a sketch and letting it render it for you, and maybe giving you some other input, from a variation standpoint. But if we just let it run wild and create, a dozen ideas off my little sketch, that's taking away the job of the designer and the creative aspect of who we are. And that's what worries me. It worries me that the creative aspect and spark of who we are as humans and people trying to create stuff could easily go away. Not to say that because what we see produced from an AI standpoint in the computer can be very, very thought-provoking. It's done tremendously well and it's done fast. So I could see where the allure is for people when they have that, but I think we have to be careful and not give up our own creative thoughts.
Do you think the speed at which we're trying to get things done in the design world, or just like on our daily life, is kind of what led to this AI kind of sort of design? Where we're like, yesterday.
People always want it yesterday, and they want it done right, and they want it to be the next best thing since sliced bread.
And under budget too.
Under budget. Right.
Does that come from the need for more profit margin for investors? Like the nth degree, we need more.
I think to some degree, yes. It really kind of depends on the companies that are out there today that are trying to produce new things. Everybody wants to be the next, I don't even like to say it this way, but people want to be the next Nike or the next Adidas. They want to be the next people or company that's creating something that's going to make billions of dollars, and, a lot of people have it. When we talk about like our cell phones and things like that, there's certain things that we have been introduced to in our lifetimes that kind of change our world and how we go about it. Apple's been a big proponent of things like that have been created. So I think the need for something that's going to drive us forward and have it be sooner than later is the problem. Craftsmanship and longevity of a product has not gone up. There's still a certain amount of craftsmanship when people are making stuff by hand, but there's definitely a fair amount of I forgot my train of thought.
Hey, no worries. Like a certain amount of control that you can have in the like the product creation process. Like it sort of takes that like autonomy away from you, I suppose.
It does somewhat. I think it can fool a lot of us. When things get created, because if it looks that fantastic on the screen of what we're looking at, you're thinking it could be made just like that.
Right.
And there was a similar issue when certain people had graduated from like Art Center. Art Center is a phenomenal school that probably teaches people better from a design standpoint and creative standpoint than any other school around.
Really? Wow.
However, and I don't know how much this has changed or not, but there were some people that would graduate from there that could draw and render phenomenally. But if you try to take their drawing and make it into a reality, it couldn't be made.
I remember that the first time we stuck in your classes, you're like, well, try and think about how the pieces are coming together. In my mind, I was just like, I couldn't put it together, and so therefore I couldn't draw it accurately and like make it happen.
Right. Being able to take stuff apart and look at stuff and how it's made changes how we're going to create it. The point that I wanted to make earlier about Photoshop and how it changed my design process, because if I were to take, we'll just take shoe as an example, and you're looking at the shoe and you have the curve that's here, and I'm trying to do it with markers on a piece of paper. I then have to come back with pencil and put the highlights in and try to make it look like it's rounded. Where in Photoshop with the airbrush tool, that was really easy and it looked so much better. So by having a tool that allowed me to express my thoughts in a more accurate way, since I knew how to use it and how light was working on a surface to recreate it, the computer wasn't creating it, I was still having to create it. But using that tool, it just made it so much more realistic. So it changed the way I would design things, because I could draw differently and have it show up better on the page. So it really became important to understand how that new tool is going to help me evolve as a designer and to create the things that I want to. And I personally, I just don't want the computer creating it for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't mind it helping me. That's the one thing I've really enjoyed about doing stuff in the 3D world in the computer, is I can create it and then I can position it how I want to it be seen, or I can then create multiple ones and then let it spend the time rendering it. I've spent the time building it and creating the shape and form that I want, but I'm going to let it render it. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. So I look at AI in the same way. If I'm creating something and I feel good about it, is it that important for me to spend the next 6 hours rendering it in a way that I can bring it to life when if I have exactly what I want? So I thought about Scott Robertson's work that I've seen on my...
Oh yeah, the sketcher, the illustration artist, yeah, incredible.
Yeah, his book How to Draw is one of the ones that I had us get at school, and I've seen some of his postings now online. You can see the sketch and then you can see the AI rendering of it. It doesn't look very different than his sketch, but it's now a 3D rendering. Whoa. So it looks really good. So I think having an understanding of how to utilize AI in a way that's going to benefit us but not take everything away from us from a creative standpoint, right, is a slippery slope, and we as people need to figure that out.
Do you think transparency would help, maybe make it a little more holistic, like being like, this is made with X amount % of AI assistance? Would that maybe make it a little bit like less of a weird taste in our mouth?
Maybe. I'm not exactly sure. I think that, as an example, when I go on LinkedIn, I've seen a gentleman create a whole bunch of different renditions. I think he was using Midjourney, and I look at this stuff and it's like, it looks cool. I said, but it's so unfeasible for putting on your foot, or how or what it would take to make something like that, and then how would that really even feel? So there's this discrepancy that happens a lot as time evolves with a certain product. At one point, back when I first got started, when I was working at Avia, it was very much about function. The cantilever, making it function for cushioning, not putting too much into the upper, just putting what needs to be there, so that it fits well and it functions. And then we went through a period of time where it didn't matter how well it worked, as long as it looked cool. Nike's gone, ups and downs through all that. They're very much into their technology, but they're all very much into how it looks. Their shoes have what we call a very dramatic toe swing. It was about a 7-degree slant over to give you this sleeker toe.
Sexy.
Yeah. Right. Sexy. Right. Sexy. However, most people's feet aren't made that way. So if you look at people when they're wearing their Nike shoes, this outside part of their shoe, either it's really heavily worn because the toes are pushing out into that space, or they get holes in the shoe because of that, or their feet hurt because their toes are being pushed.
Yeah, my little toe is like permanently this way.
Right. Yeah. So, women, to take a step back to one of my time periods at Nike, when I worked there, I was in charge of women's running when I was in the running group. And very difficult being a man when the marketing person and the development person were female, and they had their definite opinions about what we should or shouldn't do. With that said, one of the things that they agreed with me on was how much, when people would wear high heels, how their toes get pushed into their shoes and how the little pinky toe gets pushed over, that other toe gets pushed over. Also on the big toe, that toe will get pushed over and they'll get bunions. Right. On the big toe area and on the little toe. So we developed a new women's last when we did running. One, to accommodate the fact that they have narrower Achilles, and because they've spent so much time in pumps trying to find a way to give it a forefoot for your toes without changing the swing and shape too much. And it helps some, but not enough, in my opinion. Now you have companies like Keen, who have done stuff very much on a natural foot shape and have done fairly well in terms of creating shapes and forms that look really nice and still fit really well. So, but a lot of people are like, I don't care that it hurts my foot. It's a Nike, and I like the way it looks. I'm going to wear it anyway.
Yeah,
and they have survived for a lot of years with people like that. I think the industry is different now because of the amount of companies that are out there. Adidas has been pumping things out really hard from that standpoint. You've got Barefoot, Ibram. You've got a lot of different people that have come up with products now that are on a more natural foot shape.
Yeah.
So I think there's a happy medium. You want it to look good because shoes are still part of our fashionable makeup of what we're wearing.
Big statement piece.
Yeah, big statement piece. Yeah. Some people would, whether they wanted or liked the way the Jordan felt on their foot or not, they didn't care. They'd wear it because it's Jordan. So there's a stigma that would go along with certain product and certain companies. And one had a hard time really trying to make headway in the industry because they were known for smack talk on T-shirts and shorts. It was how they started their company.
Street ball tour.
Oh, really?
Street ball.
Actually, it was.
Yeah. We went to a lot of different games that those guys were playing at. They took them around different cities. So it was an interesting culture that was developed around that. And the one thing that Anwin really didn't do that that we talked about when we were there, and lots of times trying to figure out the best way to do it, was to really create a good outdoor basketball shoe. Because their stuff was always played outdoors for their street ball stuff. And it was a harder sell to get into the marketplace. So everything ended up being, more traditional looking basketball type stuff that they ended up.
Would that be considered more technical? The street ball is maybe more technical than like your typical. I think it's a lot more harder cuts and maybe less.
It could be. There's definitely a higher wear content that would happen with the product.
Okay.
Because of the surface that they're on.
Right.
Absolutely. But otherwise, technically, it needed to work just as well like a regular basketball shoe. It just had to have a better abrasion characteristics. Kind of like if you think about skateboarding.
Yeah.
And what's the tape that they put on the top of the skateboards?
The grip tape. Yeah.
That's
sandpaper, basically.
Yeah, basically just wear the heck out of your shoes. When I was at Nike, when I was transitioning from the kids group into a full-time position, I got a chance to work on a skate shoe.
Nice.
But they never made it. It was a big flop. But some of the ideas that we talked about with it really made a lot of sense that they developed into other products that were like offsetting the lacing. So on that shoe, it was basically wanted to set up in a way where you basically you could lace underneath, but you had a big flap that would come over and cover your laces so that your laces wouldn't get all shredded up.
Almost like a soccer boot where they want the
exactly.
surface to hit the ball and not get glanced off the laces.
Right, they don't want to have it get kicked in one direction or another because of your laces.
Yeah.
And we had some different materials that were added to it from a wear standpoint. It had a little bit too much going on. I think when we tried to develop it. So I don't have any drawings or samples of it anymore by any means.
I think Airwalk still makes a shoe like that though. Like Airwalk's a super old school company that makes an old school skate shoe that has that like flap over technology that protects your laces.
Right. Because anything that's going to have that kind of abrasion in a surface, tennis is another good example. The part of your shoe on tennis, people drag as they go across, would drag big spots on tennis shoes that they really wanted to address from an abrasion characteristic standpoint, how to make that better because of how people played. So there's definitely a fair amount of just with whatever product you're doing is to understand how it's being used, what's not so good about the product that's out there, so you can have some ideas of problems to solve to make the product better. And then you got to apply that with your design sense and try to make it look good as well. It's not lost on me or anyone these days that people want stuff that looks good. And even with that though, it's personal. What you like and what you like may not be what I like,
right.
And vice versa. So it's understanding a demographic of what type of a person that you're trying to create this product for. What do they like?
Yeah.
What are they about? What is their lifestyle like? To help create design language and colors and features that are going to attract to that customer.
Yeah.
So design isn't just going and drawing something fancy. It's really kind of understanding the problem in the product, why you're creating that product.
Do you think kind of working on like the 7% tilt that's on the Nike shoes and how that plays into the beauty standard, do you think we'll ever hit it, or maybe now we're kind of like flirting with it a little bit where we're starting to do it more towards what's actually good for our bodies, like anatomically, as opposed to like, you just need to fit into this because it looks great. It looks so good, And the natural shoes, the natural like footing shoes, they just like, they don't look as sexy, It's just
they don't look as sexy, but we're at a place in time now, I think, in the fashion industry and footwear industry, where people aren't as interested in the fact that it's got to look so sexy or it's got to look that good.
Right.
As an example, I wish I could think of the name of the company. I was pretty shocked by looking at their website. It's a clothing company. All of the models, both male and female, all seem to have the same kind of body type. All the clothing just looks real simple and plain. To me, when I look at it, it's like it doesn't really flatter the body, but it's what people seem to be into right now because it feels so comfortable.
It's the Billie Eilish effect, I call it, where Billie Eilish popularized just this oversized kind of like early 2000s skater baggy thing. And between that and like work from home during the pandemic, everybody just went that way. But
we just hung out in our jammies.
Yeah, I wonder if that's almost as much of a cultural thing where it's like, I think because Billie Eilish, it was kind of like, take me for who I am as a person, not for how I looked, the shape of my body.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of what's maybe driven this androgynous kind of, boxy
So I think we need
thing.
to come back around to a happy medium.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't need to just be a straight tube for your pant leg anymore.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just a sock, but it's not a pump. I think that's one of the reasons why women will wear pumps and dress shoes that way, is because it makes them feel sexy, it makes their legs look nice because they're up that way, it makes their calf look different because of the way their feet are stamped. But I'm sure it hurts the hell out of their feet.
Totally. Yeah, I've actually worn. I did a small modeling gig for an adult store here, and the one on Burnside, right next to the Patagonia store.
Yeah.
I was dating a girl who worked there, and I wore heels for like a Batman gig, and they were like 12-inch like pumps. It was hilarious. I was just walking around Burnside with a big Burnside with a big Batman cape. Yeah, it was awesome. But yeah, they are incredibly uncomfortable. They really, really hurt. It's not something I would want to be in at all the time.
So again, I think to that point of just trying to find the happy medium, find stuff that still can be made well, look good in a sense, but not make your feet hurt so bad. And that goes for clothing as well, and you know, just everything that we utilize.
Yeah.
One of the things that I always found very interesting when I was going to school, from a design standpoint, is something that they call human factors. And I was just like, human factors, who cares? Designing stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
But it's I think I was talking to you earlier when we were just holding these two rangefinders. It's like the human factor is how our bodies handle stuff, how it feels in our hand, the weight of it, how well can I utilize the technology and move it. And simple things that you change, all of a sudden ergonomically it fits differently and it feels better. So how we can move something, how we can handle it, really, really important.
The interaction.
That interaction between who we are as people.
Yeah.
And I, like I said, I used to joke about it when I was in college, and there were some people that were going to go work for companies that did just human factors studies. And I'm thinking, wow, that's got to be boring. Why would I want to do that? But the more I thought about it, and as time went on, I realized how important the interface of who we are, whether it be our hands, our feet, our elbows, our eyes, all that is a huge integral part of how we design something. Headphones. I think one of the hardest things for people to design from that standpoint is glasses. One, people's faces are very drastically different from the bridge of their nose to where their ears are. But then, because of the shapes of our faces, the shape of a glass lens can look horrible or look really good.
Yeah.
So again, it really just comes sort of back to that human factor aspect of, okay, if I'm going to design glasses, I need a head and a face to sketch with, so I can understand really what I'm trying to do here and how those shapes affect the different shapes on our faces. Because not everybody can wear the same glasses and have it look good on you. Some people's glasses, you put on like, yeah, those don't look good on you.
Yeah.
And other ones they put, it's like, those look great on
Like
you.
the Morpheus ones, they're not for everybody, but
Yeah,
Morpheus
I couldn't do
looks
that.
kick-ass in
Yeah,
those.
exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, I can wear glasses that have a smaller frame and they can look okay.
Yeah.
Otherwise you can't see. Is that a T or is that an
Right.
I? I never thought I'd have to be wearing readers. A number of years ago I transitioned. I can see well, but if I'm drawing up closer and want to read, I have to wear glasses. Our eyes change. But again, the main point was how we as people interact with whatever it is that we're using, whether it be a cup, whether it be a pair of gloves, our shoes, our coats. We're using them. So the human factor aspect of how we interact with it is really, really important.
Yeah.
And if I could go back to myself back at that age, I'd kick myself. Hey, wake up. It's an integral part of what we do.
It should be a higher priority in your
Yes.
design process.
Exactly. It would be a higher priority in the design process. As an example, I want to cut you off real quick. When I was teaching and I had the opportunity to do a transportation class, the car class, I'd never drawn cars before.
Like public transportation?
No,
Oh,
automotive design.
Okay.
Car design. I took the one class that a different teacher was teaching at the time.
That Stormer?
Yes,
Yeah.
Stormer, exactly.
I remember. He was like right at the kind of when I was coming in.
Yeah, he was only there for that short time, but I took that class with him because I wanted to get a better understanding of car design. But that's the biggest feature is they call it the package.
Oscar, right? Oscar package.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
That person that's sitting in the vehicle, where they are, is where everything starts. That space that the people are going to be in, let alone to where the motor is going to be and other things like that. But that part is where they have to start. They've got to know what's important there so they can build from that, to create your wheelbase, to create your doors, your height, where the motor's going to go. But the space that people are going to sit in is paramount. Because if you can't get in it and utilize what's there, you can't drive the car, right?
Yeah.
So to the point, that it's paramount that we understand how we're going to interface with something. It's not just a painting that's sitting on the wall. Even a TV, nowadays it's a little different because the TV is just sitting on the wall. We're using a remote to control it. But that remote and how that feels in your hand and pressing the button, that's your human factor aspect of how we interact with it. So it's still important.
That's actually one of the key things or one of the first things I learned in Jim Arnold's class, and one of the professors at the Art Institute told me, he's like, we're just going to, everyone go out and sit in the park blocks and just watch people use things. And just see how they interact with them, and if it's an intuitive interaction, or one where they're like, I can't figure out how to use this stop sign, or like this like it's supposed to like cross the street. And I literally learned a lot just through pure observation. I wonder if those human studies that your friends were after college were doing was mostly observation, or actually like talking and like.
No,
and
I don't really know, but I would imagine a lot of both.
Yeah.
Where they would be doing studies, have people come in and have different examples, and have them try to use them and observe it, and then see what works, what doesn't work.
Yeah.
When we I had the opportunity to do a chair when I was in college, and the human factor studies that have been done on chairs is phenomenal. I mean, there's so much that goes into how we sit, where our armrests are, how we sit into it. And at first I was going to do the chair was going to be like an office chair.
Okay.
And so I was kind of playing around with that, but then I realized I just want to keep it simple. So I ended up changing my brief as I went along on the project, because it was part of my thesis, to a kid's playroom chair. Okay. So something that's really simple, light enough for them to move around, take apart, put back together, easy to clean.
Yeah.
But I explored a lot of just how we sit, whether we, sit with a chair, have the back of the chair here, spin it around, or whether you're sitting on a stool, and again, how the backrests feel from that standpoint. That was a lot of fun, but once I changed it from the office chair to a kid chair, that's where the fun really started, because then I could create something pretty simple. And I created a blow molded chair.
Nice.
Yeah, 2 pieces, basically tabbed together in a fabric piece that velcroed on, so you could take that off and wash it really easy.
Wow.
Yeah, that was fun to make a big foam chair, cover it with spackle, sand it all down, paint it.
Man, I never did a kids design class, but I always wanted to, because it just seems like how the young mind tries to interpret how to use something is fascinating.
We can learn so much by watching children do stuff that way that I wouldn't never even think about and play with stuff.
Yeah, I have something like my younger nieces and nephews. Like, they don't even try and figure stuff out. They're just like, I don't know how this works. I'm not going to use it. I'm like, what are you doing? It's like a phone stand. Like, come on, it's so easy to use. Like, let's try and figure it out.
Right.
It's just hilarious.
Yeah, to kind of take a step back to the AI thing. Because it relates to kind of what you're saying. That patience level or ability for humans today to take the extra time is going by the wayside.
Right.
Because people want stuff so fast and want to see stuff that much quicker, that many more different ideas, which is probably why AI is becoming so popular in that sense, because it allows for that. It allows for that speed and transition where, and if it's doing it for me, I don't have to worry about it, I don't have to think about it, but if I have to figure it out, it's too much time for me to put in.
But like, part of the joy as a designer is taking that time, at least for me. Like, I think I told you, like, if nobody gives me a deadline, I'll spend forever if I really like what I'm working on, because I want to go through all the different rabbit holes of ideas and research and ideation. Like, I enjoy that part. It's like, it's when somebody's like, oh, we need to do tomorrow. You're like, okay. That kind of zaps the fun. So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Taking the time with something is, from a creative standpoint, I think brings a lot of people joy. Maybe a little esoteric, but the reason that we're all here is to create. People are here on the planet, I think, to create. Whether create more humans, whether create a certain lifestyle, whether create things to help you do what you want to do, but you want to create art. That aspect of creating feels really good usually in here. And I've realized now over the last couple of years that since I haven't done as much drawing and creating as I used to, I really do miss it. I miss that enjoyment of just spending the time with a piece of paper or paint, and you're doing something, and I'm not doing it to sell it, I'm just doing it to do it, and it feels really good. So to your point of, if you have as much time as you need on something, or as want on something, you'll just keep working on it. Could be kind of a double-edged sword sometimes, because you just never get somewhere. So I think having a timeline is good to help you try to work through your stuff to come to a solution versus just keep coming up with ideas. Sometimes too, you only have so many ideas, and you get to a point where it's like, I don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
But when you're doing something, there is typically a real enjoyment that comes from inside when you're creating. When I've spent the time doing some watercolors over the last couple of years, just the idea of doing it felt really good. I mean, I'm doing a painting of flowers and bees, you know, but it was fun.
Yeah.
You know, and it felt really good to do, and I really enjoyed that time that I spent doing it, which is something that I think we all need.
It's like the adult version of playing as like a kid, like bringing that to this moment.
Because all kids are drawing. You're like kindergarten, you're all drawing and making stuff, and at some point, some of us just kind of forget that's a thing. Like we get society, parents, whatever, just kind of molds you into this thing where you know, go get a job, work in finance, blah blah blah, and then one day you wake up and you're like, wait, I used to create stuff. I used to love finger painting and stuff. And some of us remember that and just evolve that into an adult career.
Yeah, I mean, again, if we go back to AI and the use of that technology, I could see where if that starts to take away so much of that creativity of the person, how that's going to change society and how we are as people. Because we're not doing that creating anymore. Something else is doing it for it.
Yeah.
And the thing I always look at is like some of the greatest masterpieces in human history as far as art and design, whether it's the pyramids or, you know, the Michelangelo, the ceilings, Sistine Chapel, all these things, the architecture, I mean, the Cologne Cathedral, all these, you know, Gaudi, the cathedral, like all these buildings were done without AI, without Photoshop, without anything. And it's like, we supposedly have so many more tools at our disposal, but we're not creating stuff like that anymore. Like, what's the disconnect? Where did we lose something along the road?
Yeah, we want to try to utilize more of our brain than less of it. To the point of somebody like Gaudi and the temple or cathedral, I should say, that's still being worked on today, the Sagrada Familia down in Barcelona.
Oh, wow.
It's a phenomenal cathedral. I've been there and I've walked through the place. Been over a decade, actually, more like a decade and a half, if not more, ago that I was there looking at that. But for him, as a person, to understand how to build what he wanted to build, he took the technology they had at the time, which was a mirror, rocks, and string. And he basically created loops of string with rocks on them to visualize how he wanted to build a cathedral. And he could look at it in the mirror so he could see it turn upright the way it would be. And that's how he figured out how he could do what he wanted to do with that building. It's a pretty phenomenal thing at the time. And it's still being, you know, it's had a lot of different architects work on it nowadays. Back when I was there, they were still having plans to create this really big tall spire and have it go out like a cross. But I haven't seen that in any pictures that I've seen recently of what they've been doing with it. So I don't know if they scrapped that idea or simplified it or not. But if you ever get an opportunity to go to Spain, that's a place to go. To see that in person and to walk around in it was phenomenal. I would consider myself spiritual, but I'm not religious.
Yeah, but it has that sense, that like higher sense of being when you're in those places.
When you walk around in that place, there's an aura that it gives off that there's no way to describe than being in it.
Yeah.
You know, if you've ever been to like Notre Dame or any other big cathedrals, they have a similar about them because so many people have gone in there and prayed, and you know that the energy in the place is there, and you can feel it.
Yeah.
And the attention to detail, like the macro, of course, it's like the big thing, but then you start to notice the smaller things along the building. You're like, whoa! Like I went to the Duomo in Milano, and it was just absolutely incredible. Every little bit of it was just impeccable.
That's what's phenomenal when you see stuff like that. You think, wow, this was created by man, or not, you know, based on what it is, and you look at it and go, like back when they developed just the vaulted arch, you know, from a construction standpoint, what that did then to the development of all the buildings and stuff that they were starting to develop when they created a new technology. So now today we've developed AI, you know, so it's going to be very interesting to see where we go over the next 5 to 10 years with what's happening, because it's at rapid paces, you know, doing things that, you know, we never really dreamed of yet.
Do you think that at this point right now we're sort of like casting the net really, really far, and then we're going to like reel it back in eventually? But at what point does it reach its like farthest point, and is that going to be too far gone?
Right, is that going to be too far? Where all of a sudden, you know,
does it become
humanity now?
sentient?
Yeah, you know, the whole idea of sentient machines. You know, we've all seen way too many sci-fis, I think, in our day, but is it really that far-fetched?
Yeah.
You know, we think about what we've done before we had AI with just the development of the computers. You know, Dick Tracy with having a watch with a screen kind of thing on our wrist was just just that back in the 50s, and now it's a normal thing
Yeah.
that we have. So
Now it's in the eyeglasses, and like you can have augmented
Right.
reality like right in front of your eyeballs.
you know, there's a movie called Upgrade that was done. I can't remember exactly when, but it drives home for me just the point of how careful we have to be with technology. You know, doing implants into the body. I mean, we have a lot of stuff that we've been able to do for the body. I mean, I've had my own surgeries. I've got screws and rods in my back.
Yeah.
So I don't think that it's bad, but I think if we start putting computer chips and other things in us, how what happens to our humanity will be very, I think, disturbing to us. And that movie Upgrade is very much about that. It's about self-driving cars and how, you know, anything can be hacked, right? I don't know if I want to give away the story, but it's an older movie, but I'll talk
Spoiler
about it
alert.
this way. Spoiler alert. You know, it's a husband and wife, and they both work for this company that's developing new technology, and they're going out that evening to dinner. They've got a car, and it's a self-driving car. You know, they're sitting in the back seat, and it's driving them somewhere, and all of a sudden they're like, we're not at the restaurant. It's taking them someplace else.
Herbie's got a mind of his own.
Yeah, Herbie's got a mind of his own. And so they stop, and they get out where it stops, and there's people waiting there and that attack them and basically paralyze him, shoot him in a way where and this is all set up. This is all set up by the company because they want to have somebody that's paralyzed to do their experiment with, to put electronic chips in to be able to help him walk again.
Oh wow! Communicate with the rest of the body
And
again.
communicate with the body. Let's just say it goes pretty awry.
Yeah.
From that. His wife also works for the company, and she wasn't involved in that aspect of it, but she finds out, and it's just how quickly he as the being transforms from a mental standpoint and a physical standpoint because of that computer chip and what it's telling him to do, not do. And it basically, at a certain point in the movie, it takes over and it basically puts him, his I'll call it his soul or his consciousness, into a space in his brain where he thinks he's in a different place with his wife still alive and living a whole different life. That being now, that chip and that entity now has control over him.
Wow.
He's now put in this little compartment in his brain
Different dimension.
that he's no longer in that reality.
Dang, that's like ultimate simulation theory, where it's like I'm gonna put this little movie on for you here that you think is real.
Yeah. And so when I saw that movie, I was like, that's not that far-fetched.
Wow.
So, yeah. So we have to be careful, I think, from that standpoint. With governments and technology and crazy people out there today, who knows what can happen.
Yeah.
But
wow.
it wouldn't be good.
For you, what I've always appreciated about you as a student of yours and as a friend is that your design journey has always been, I think, more value driven, you know, and even the esoteric side. For designers coming up, like out of school already, kind of in the industry, who are also more value driven, like value over profit, value over just churning out product for product's sake. Like, what advice would you give them to navigate this very corporate, profit driven, tech driven, like, so they don't lose their mind, you know? What would you say to them?
Know, that's a very open-ended question, I guess. I would say everybody's different in terms of their journey and how they want to approach design. I mean, if I were to try to go out and have a design job today, I'm not sure I could. Mainly because AI is being utilized so dramatically in a way, and I have to learn a whole other set of skills.
Yeah.
I've spent the time going from a pencil and a technical pen to Photoshop and 3D work in the computer, and I've never made the transition from where I was into AI. But the biggest thing, I think, for anybody getting involved in wanting to do design work is to really just think about, it doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg to have good design. Good design can be something that costs you very little, or it could cost you very much. I would say try not to get enamored with status or trying to be the next, create something that, Prada's going to sell. It's going to be a product that's going to cost, $1,000 for somebody. Not to say that it shouldn't cost that much, depending on how it's made and what it is, but that's not the reality for me. And I think that if people strive for that kind of a thing, they're going to lose the sense of how they're creating and why they're creating it, versus, if it's just, I just want to put as much bells and whistles into it so we can charge as much for it, and even if it didn't cost that much to make it, we're still going to charge it because it's got this label called Prada on it, or Gucci, or Nike. So I think it's important to keep yourself grounded in just the reality of being a good person and creating good design and understanding that it shouldn't be something that has to, break the bank for people to appreciate and to be able to utilize and have as their own, as something to use. I think some of the simplest products out there are some of the best. I mean, think about a pocket knife. Mm-hmm. It's a very simple design. There's lots of different versions out there. Some cost a lot more, some don't, but they're still the basic same idea, having a case that a blade's going to fit into and keep it protected. So I think for most of us, it's really just trying to create something that's going to make something a better product. If it's just to create another one of the same, maybe you can find a different job or find a different product to create. Footwear is a really good example, I think, of that. We create more and more footwear, some of which, in my opinion, doesn't need to be. Yeah. One of the things that I didn't like about Nike with the amount of product that they would create every season was there was this 80-20 rule that was kind of talked about. 20% of the product makes 80% of the revenue for the company. The other 80% really doesn't fucking matter.
It's like you're talking about like the player specials and stuff, or the limited edition for...
Limited edition, if I've got...
Mardi Gras.
If I've got, 7 basketball shoes,
yeah,
or 8 basketball shoes, 2 of them are going to sell the most. The other ones are just there, for Foot Locker and for certain price points, but still what's going to sell the most are going to be these 2 models. Mm-hmm. And those 2 models will have marketing behind them, marketing dollars and everything else. So do we really need 8 shoes?
Right.
And to produce that much and to have that much waste for the materials, for the extra materials, the product that doesn't get sold, where does it all go? So in my mind, whenever we create product or create something new, it should be for a reason. And it shouldn't just be to create more of the same or just more. And I'm hoping that that's really shifting now in terms of what companies do, because we have so much landfill space that's filled up with, please don't take this the wrong way, made in China. Go to the dollar store. It's horrible.
It's just mass produced
It's
for
just
really
mass-produced stuff,
small amounts, yeah.
And all that's there, and it's not made well. An example I can think of is back in the day, I remember buying a plastic bucket there, and I brought it home, and I went to go use it, and I think my hose thing hit it by accident, shattered it. The plastic was that brittle, and that cheaply made, and the wall thicknesses were that thin that it wasn't worth the money I spent on it. There has to be a way for people to express their creativity, have things that are created for people to use that make sense, but we don't need the plethora of stuff that we have in our environment today. So trying to find the right shift in the marketplace and in our world to have maybe not as many companies or not as much stuff, but having stuff just made well and made purposeful, I think is where we need to probably go to. But a lot of people, when they get involved in design, want to be the person that's going to create something that's going to be the next Jordan,
right?
Or it's going to be the next iPhone.
Yeah. And
that's really not that. That's very unrealistic for people. And I think that new people getting involved in the industry is to understand that certain products that created in our society that changed the way we live or changed what people have. The iPod today was a good Walkman.
Yeah.
When you could carry around a little radio or a tape player on your belt and listen to music, that was a big deal back then. It was revolutionary, right?
Yeah.
Now we have our phone that's basically a computer that's got all our music on it, and we have different apps for all these different other companies to listen to music, and we have headphones that we put on that are wireless, so you don't have to have a wire or anything like that anymore. Mm-hmm. But those things have changed who we are and how we interact in our society. But they're few and far between when we come up with products in a way that do that. So we have to be okay with creating more of some of the same. But even when we are doing that, I do feel it's important to try to solve a problem versus just do another basketball shoe.
Yeah.
It's going to cost that we can sell for $65 or sell for $90 or sell for $120. It's not just it's going to be more impactful as a product and to society, and would actually make more money for the company if what gets created has a purpose and it's helping to solve a problem. As an example, when Keen started making the shoes on more of a natural last for your foot. No, it didn't look that great at first until they figured out ways to shape it and work with what patterns are being done so that it looked okay on your foot. But as soon as they did that, it changed the industry because now people are finding that they can buy something that doesn't hurt their feet. No, it doesn't have a nice pointy toe, but do I need a pointy toe? My foot's not pointy. Can I get used to this kind of a shape? And I think that's happened. So just to kind of wrap back to it, I think if people understand that if I get involved to create something that's going to be the next newest thing since sliced bread, that's phenomenal. but that's not the norm. Some people have an idea to help create something that can get funded and create something that does help change the industry. I think before Tesla even came out with their electric cars, we had the development of Rivian. That they didn't make it to the marketplace before Tesla products did, but they're out there now. And that was kind of revolutionary in terms of how they were utilizing the actual space in the vehicle to do different things that weren't ever done before. And so their SUVs and pickups had some really unique features. Whether they were electric or gas didn't matter to me, because they had some more space in the vehicle since they didn't have the same setup. It allowed them to create things in a way that really made it purposeful for a person having that vehicle, having these other new features. So just as a person, I think if you can always just think, I want to create something with a purpose or solve a problem versus just create a nice looking product, that's going to help you feel better, I think, about what you're doing and why you're doing it. If you're trying to solve a problem and create something that another shoe with a phone or another whatever it is that's just a pleasing shape. Not that that's bad, because I think we still want things to look good. And there are times where that may just be the design brief. What we created here, this is how it functions, and we want to still have it function that way, but we need to make it look better. So what are we going to do?
It's a fashion thing.
These shoes that I worked on at Nike right before I left, from a cross-training standpoint, the only thing that we did about them to make the thing really different about it was we were trying to make them lighter. So the only way to make it lighter, one of the big things about making it lighter was less rubber.
Yeah.
More foam. So put rubber only where you really need it from a wear standpoint, and then utilize other materials on your upper that are going to be breathable and lighter that way versus leather. So that was really the brief for these two products. Other than that, you're trying to make it look good.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, that less rubber from a weight standpoint and from a material standpoint, that's functional, but that's not helping me design what it's going to look like. So then I have to think about how I'm going to make it, what's going to be about fit, and what can I look at in the industry today that's got some design language that I gravitate to, that I could utilize now to create some different shapes and forms on the foot that's going to look. So that's a lot of what would go into certain things like that. A product like this from back at And One, it was really this was the first signature shoe I ever worked on, and it was for Stephen Marbury, and his big thing that he was interested in was music and playing basketball. And I was lucky enough to come up with this design language, which basically incorporated the S standpoint, and then all the vertical lines that are on here. When I first did them, they were all broken up, and it was supposed to be like the lines that you see.
The mixing thing.
Yeah. I see that now that you say that. I'm like,
so that's where the design language came from, and he dug it. He really enjoyed that. And then I just kind of use the idea of fish bones for the bottom from a traction standpoint to give me something different versus just plain old herringbone. But that's the philosophy that went into it. Trying to do something that's going to stand out for him on the court and give him some things that he gravitates to that make the shoe more personal. It doesn't look like the mixing lump here, but as soon as you say that, you go, oh, I can see that now when I look at the lines, even though otherwise it just looks like some embossed lines out here to kind of fill up some of the space. But taking the time to try to solve a problem always makes you feel better.
I love that, trying to incorporate like little. I do very little of that now, where it's like trying to incorporate like little inspirations or little things that people love and try and bring that into the product. But I love hearing about stuff like that, where it's like, there's like it's doing. I mean, it's a very subtle way, but it's got such a big impact and drawback to the main brief.
Before I touch on this design that I would say that I'm probably the most proud of outside of the shoe here from And One, was a concept shoe that I was working on. But I wanted to just touch base for just a quick second on something that we talked about earlier, which was inspiration and what I do. And I didn't mention this, and I really wanted to bring it back to the awareness of whoever's listening or getting involved in design. And it's really looking to nature. Nature is an inspiration point, whether it be the overall shapes of something, the colors and graphics. As an example, if you look at fish, the graphic quality that you see on fish is phenomenal. I mean, I don't know how Mother Nature did what he or she did to create all those things.
They were having fun.
They're definitely having fun. But nature is definitely a great source of inspiration. If you get no ideas from a look at nature, at a minimum, it's going to make you feel good. I know for myself, when I get out and take a walk in nature, it just, a lot of the other pressures and stresses I feel sort of fade away because you're in an environment that feels really good. But there's a lot of qualities to how things are created in nature that can be a great source of inspiration. This product that I'm going to talk about here in a second, nature is not an inspiration point for it, but I would have to say that I utilize nature a lot to come up with ideas for how I want something to function or how I want something to look or feel based on the qualities that I see in nature. But when we talked about before about me wanting to be involved as a marine biologist that I didn't pursue, I've never lost my interest in the ocean and in the animal marine life that's there, and I use it a lot for inspiration, whether it just be for creating imagery that I care about, as it be like dolphins or manta rays and that kind of thing. But for me, it's a way to connect back to the earth and who I am. I would have to say that just the ideas in terms of when you really start to scrutinize something in nature, whether it just be a plant, how it creates the shapes that it does is always very thought-provoking. So I would say, at a minimum, if somebody's stuck on somewhere and they can't find the inspiration for what they're looking for, go take a walk in nature, or go look at trees, or go look at other animals or insects. There's so much that's there that we can tap into, and even just a small part of it. If you take it, like a dragonfly wing, the amount of intricacies that are there, that could be a cool pattern.
Yes.
That's probably where some of the meshes came from. For today. So I just wanted to bring that back around because I was remembering that and I didn't want to forget.
Thank you.
But I'm going to talk for a minute just about one of my most favorite projects and ones that I'm the most proud of. This is one that I would say is that it was from a consultant project that I worked on with a guy that had a very unique idea and way and philosophy of how to run. But the biggest part that makes me so proud of it is I was getting involved in 3D design work. And I've always felt that when we're creating stuff in 2D, there's a lot of interpretation that has to go on, and somebody who's going to then take my drawing and make a mold or try to make the patterns for that idea. And finding that if I can create something in 3 dimensions and turn it around and look at it, I can figure out how I want the shapes to transition from one side to the other, and I can give that information to the factory and hopefully have them make that exactly for what I was looking for. Most of the footwear that I've done over my career has typically gone through probably at least 3 rounds of revisions. You get your initial sample, then you make some changes to how the details are on your mold. They have to make a new sample mold for the outsole and midsole, typically, and then you're going through easily, in most cases, probably half a dozen different renditions of what you're doing on the upper. And it could just be with where certain lines fall together, how pieces interact with each other, how many pieces are there. So, a factory might go, we're just going to go straight over here where you really wanted a nice S-curve. So there's a lot of little revisions that go on that way. This whole shoe was done completely in 3D. Including the upper and the tooling, because it's all an integral component in this case, because we took the midsole foam and went from inside the shoe and brought it all the way up and to create the heel shape to make it fit better. We also changed the weight of the product as well. In this case, this shoe had a lot of rubber on it, so I knew it was going to have a fair amount of weight from that standpoint. So I wanted to do whatever I could to take the weight out. So by taking all the material that really created the whole back part of the shoe, including the heel counter that's in there was a piece of plastic, all the glue, all the stitching, making it all in foam with just a little bit of a heel lining, took ounces out of the shoe. So we were able to make this shoe with a polyurethane insole, EVA heel component and forefoot, welded on upper, and the forefoot, I think it came out at about 10.5 ounces at the time. If we have a scale, we could weigh it right now to see, but I think it was around 10.5, maybe it can be 11. But in the industry at that time, 12 ounces was kind of the sweet spot for a running shoe. So we wanted to try to be a little bit under that. Unfortunately, the shoe never made it to production, but I would have to say first round sample, which is what I'm holding in my hand, came out almost 99% done.
Yeah, it looks like a
finished production shoe that you could go to the store and buy. And in my whole career of footwear, which I even hate to say how long it's been, but I probably have been in the industry, which I'm no longer doing, for about 30 years.
Wow.
So 30 years in the industry is quite a long time to only have one shoe come out so well the first time. Most of the time, it would take many renditions to get it to be with what everybody was hoping it to be. So that for me was a big shining star, I guess I would say, for my career. Convincing the client, number one, to spend the money and time for me to do it that way, but it saved so much time afterwards in terms of what we got back. We were able to run in it. I think the only thing we changed in it was inside the shoe in the one component. The only thing we changed was just to add a little bit more density of the one foam that came further up under the ball of the foot, because it actually crossed the ball of the foot from where we had it initially, and I didn't compensate for that, so we had to move it slightly. But that was a very minor change compared to redoing anything. It didn't require a new mold because those insert pieces were a separate mold, so it was easy to just modify the mold that it was going to fit into. I had to take away some metal on that other part to create a new piece, and then it worked out great. Everybody that ran in it loved it. I was very depressed the fact that the company didn't have enough money to take it into production and get it into the marketplace, because I think it could have revolutionized some of the footwear industry. We talk about products that created today that change how we go about things and look at things in our world, like the iPod and things like that, and our phones. I think this could have added a big splash to the footwear industry. Like I said, it didn't get anywhere, which was unfortunate. And if I look back at it, what I would change on it, the only thing I would really change on it as an entity would have been to just try to see what I could do to make it a little bit simpler. Maybe I didn't need quite as many overlays in here to hold your foot together. Maybe I could find a better mesh that could support the foot without having any overlays on it, or just maybe a little tip. But overall, there isn't really a lot that I would want to change on it. I felt that as a product for the running industry, that it was on point, and it wasn't something that I would really want to change anything of, other than maybe give it some other colors, or maybe do something from a textural standpoint, because the foam back here is all just a nice matte finish without a texture, which had a nice contrast to the mesh of your upper. For something that I would change that I'm very proud of, because I guess I would say I was so proud of the way it came out initially and from the initial sketches. One thing I didn't mention earlier is this is actually the second time I've tried to do this product for this company. Before I spent the time to do this version, I had spent about 6 months working with another developer and a marketing gentleman who actually brought Nicholas Romanoff to me to do the first round samples of the design idea. At that time, we were trying to do way too many different things. We were trying to have the densities of the foam that are inside the shoe that you run on poke through the bottom, as opposed to just poke through the back. As a piece. It was just way too complicated, and the design language had a bit of things going on it that didn't work together. So after I had done that initial sample with them, the project kind of went on hold for 2 years until they came back to me and said, okay, we have more funding and we want to continue with the project. And so I told them at that time, I said, well, now I have the ability to work in 3 dimensions from a design standpoint, and basically there's definitely things that I've learned from the first round of samples that we did that didn't work well, that I would want to change, and I want to create a better product based on how I would design it now, how we would make it. And I think if I showed you this, and I don't have a sample of the other version, I have a picture of it I could show you, it's night and day. And this came out so much better.
How did it feel to have somebody put that much faith in you, just to say, yeah, go for it, shoot for the moon?
It was it felt very good to have somebody that I'd never met before put that faith in me. And I would say that faith he put in me based on our first meeting. When we first met, I was open-minded. I didn't have any preconceived notions of what the shoe would be or how we would go about it. I was very much interested in hearing from him, in understanding. I wanted to see his notepad. I wanted to see how he came up with the ideas, what he was talking about, and why, so I could understand his running philosophy and try to encompass that into a visual form and create a product that would exemplify his thinking and take it to the next level. And when I spoke with him about all of that and we talked, we got to be really good friends very quickly. And I think because of my open-mindedness and my willingness to really want to take his philosophy and ideas of how he wanted people to run and put that into a product, but really trying to focus on how he did it and why he did it, I think that gave him the ability to really trust me. That I was looking at it. I wasn't just looking at it from a money standpoint or just to create another running shoe. I was wanting to create something that was really unique, based on his philosophy that could really enhance things, enhance that running property. And it definitely worked. He trusted me, and like I said, even though the first round samples and design language that I came up with, which I don't even like to show anybody because it's not that great, I convinced him that we learned a lot from what didn't work. And to make a shoe that had holes in the bottom, that you had big pieces showing through, that would actually allow the insert piece with the densities to function better because you had a little bit more foam to work with, was a good idea, but it wasn't practical from a functional standpoint to produce. But that's what led me to going, okay, well, we want that to work that way, but we want to still let people know that there's something else going on here and find a way to have it go together in a way that was simplistic. And I think with what I came up with here after I did probably half a dozen different thumbnail ideas, that this idea really struck him, struck me, and then we refined it in a way that it really made sense. But to answer your main question about, how did that feel to have somebody trust me that way, when you meet a new client and they're going to be spending a certain amount of money on to trust you that way feels really good, but it also adds a whole lot of pressure. He's putting his faith in me, and I want to make sure I come through. Like I said, the first round that I did with it all didn't come out nearly as good as I was hoping. It was done in the traditional way of doing shoes, giving a side view, top view sketch with a 2D blueprint kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And it definitely, I had the same issues that I would have anytime. I've got that first round sample, there's stuff that's wrong with it. Where first round sample with this, there's basically nothing wrong with it, which is phenomenal. So having him have that kind of level of faith in me because of the way we communicated with each other and really trying to bring about his philosophy of running and how to put that into a visual form so that people can understand it and have it make sense was phenomenal for me to have somebody trust me, but also to have me spend the time. He basically, you find the factory, you get your developer, you get the people that you want to work with to do it, and we'll pay you. You just let us know what it's going to cost up front. And we did. We found it. And, when you have something that you're working on with somebody and you're not going to be producing 500,000 pair for the year, you're talking, maybe 5,000 a month from a projected standpoint. Most factories don't want to talk to you.
Right.
They want to know that they're going to be guaranteed, 20,000 pairs every month or whatever it may be, and it's in your 5-year plan. That's going to go up to 30,000, whatever it may be. So it was difficult to find a factory, one that had the quality and skill set to be able to do what we were trying to do, but then be willing to help us develop it, knowing that it's not going to be that kind of a volume of product. Having a developer that I've known for a lot of years back from when I worked at Avia, I contacted him. He knew another couple people over in China that we could work with to help us find the factory. We finally found a place. So there's some struggles in there, but the Romanovs, they couldn't be doing that. They needed us to do it. And like I said, unfortunately, the funding that they had to pursue to take this into production fell through. So the project, once we had our first round samples and had it been working as well as it did, it just stalled out and didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Man, oh man, oh man.
Yeah, so that's probably one of the biggest frustrations I think I've had in my career. A product like that is I'm developing something that I feel really good about. I understand. I've tried to run with the same philosophy and emotions that he talked about. It worked well.
Yeah.
I felt really passionate about the product, that this is going to be a game changer, and then to have it not go anywhere, that definitely takes the wind out of your sail.
Yeah.
But if you understand how the industry works and what goes on, you kind of just chalk it up to that side of the board, going, okay, here's another good one that didn't go anywhere. And if you look at your board, you got a lot of those little hash marks all over because of what you're doing, because there's so much that you create that fortunately doesn't always go anywhere.
Yeah, it's still a win for you personally as a designer, just for
Absolutely
executing your vision and his vision. And
yeah, I think that was one of the biggest things that he felt bad about. He was going, because when he saw this version and how well it worked, he was like, you did it. You took what I've been talking about for years on how to run and how to be, and you create a product that exemplifies that. And it didn't happen for them, for the industry. Some of what happened, I think, for them, they didn't have their funding shored up in a way that could take it into production. So since they didn't have that, they really wanted to they were going to try to take the idea and try to sell it to somebody like Reebok or Nike, but they also wanted shit tons of money for their idea. And I tried to convince them that I said, that's nobody's going to do that. It's a good idea. People are going to want a good idea for pennies so they can make a lot of money on it. And you want it the other way around. You've got the idea and you want a whole bunch of money so they can then do what they need to do with it.
Right.
Years later, I actually tried to work with them. Like I said, I think I told you I was going to try to sell the idea to Mizuno. Mm-hmm. I was like, I have all the information about the product. I know people at Mizuno. I can communicate it well. I can present it well. Maybe they would buy the idea, but they're going to buy it like this for this amount of money, kind of a thing. And they were like, no, we don't want to do that. We want X amount for it. And I'm like, well, then good luck. I said, you have to be smart about it. I mean, get them to buy the idea for a certain amount and then get royalties.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're getting paid later on, but they're not having to give you $5 million for your idea. They'll give you $750,000 or whatever makes sense from a reasonable standpoint for both parties versus you got to negotiate and find a happy medium. But they weren't interested. They were like, it's the best idea since sliced bread. We should be paid for it. Blah blah blah. I said, and this was Nicholas's son, who was Severin, who he worked with. That was really, in my mind, the roadblock. I think Nicholas could have been convinced to sell it to a company at a reasonable cost and get royalties out of it afterwards. But like I said, it just never went anywhere.
Yeah.
But even still, it's one of my most favorite projects, and I'm really proud of the most because of just what went into it and how well it came out so quickly. Another one like that would be something like this for Teva, where they wanted to have a running sandal. that was different than the other sandals that they have. And so to keep it lightweight, we basically created a unit that was mostly foam. And then the straps is a strapping system that I came up with for a different sandal that we applied to here, but it was just super lightweight, and you basically just had straps attached to your foam.
Which is funny because now everybody's doing foam runners, sandals, clogs. Like it's foam everywhere you turn around. Nike now has a foam croc thing. Like everybody's on this bandwagon, and you're already doing this.
Yeah, and this is probably 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I can look at my drawings that I did for it and see what the date is, but off the top of my head, it's got to be at least 15 years ago. Let me take a look.
There's something to be said about being like having such an innovative idea, but if it's too far ahead of the gap, it's like
Yes, it's like if you think about motorcycles, a single swing arm. Great idea, it functions well, but it scared the shit out of everybody.
What is a single swing arm? Sorry.
Instead of having the back part of your motorcycle with two sides to attach to your wheel, it's basically one swing arm that attaches to one side of your wheel.
It's like your bicycle frame would only have one side on the back.
Okay.
So you're like, your chain isn't supported by much other than just the sprocket. There's nothing for it to like cage, which would be freaky in a crash, especially if it's like made out of all carbon fiber, which now a lot of the stuff is like, even race bikes are mostly carbon fiber.
Yeah.
Thought I had my original, I'd probably do somewhere, but I can't seem to find it. Here it is.
Nice.
Put my glasses on here so I can. 2012.
Wow. That's the year I went to Coachella, and you were doing some crazy footwear stuff back then. Wow.
Back in the crazy sandal days.
Wow.
But yeah, these are the ones that started that whole thing going.
Incredible.
That was 2012. May of 2012. 15 years ago. I'm getting old.
Where does the time go, man?
The gray hair comes in, and parts of it leave. We know we're getting older. Well, what else would you like to know?
As far as like jobs that you've been at, like in ones that maybe like places you've left, I've sort of like picked up different lessons, and like what's like one or two lessons that you've picked up along the way that you've sort of either like the most meaningful or informed your future decisions?
I would say one of the biggest things, and this actually came out of the first job I had out of school when I was working up at Boeing, Walter Teague. The biggest thing that I learned from working there, and it wasn't that long a time, was really just believe in yourself. No matter what it is that you're doing, don't bullshit people, but believe in yourself. Have an understanding of why you're doing what you're doing so that you can express that. Because if people want to understand, if you're trying to design somebody, they'll be like, well, why did you do that like that? Right. You want to be able to express yourself and let them know why you did what you did, so that it makes sense for the product. If people understand how something gets created, they get a different emotional attachment to what it is. Mm-hmm. So I have found that one comment about really just believing in yourself helps you get through the times where you're creating shoes that don't get into production, for whatever reasons. So not to get so down on yourself that you go, oh, I can't do this anymore, or I shouldn't be a designer because I don't know what I'm doing. You do know what you're doing. Just what you created isn't right for right now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Might not be ready ever based on what you did, but that doesn't mean you're a bad designer. Really believing in yourself and why you're doing what you're doing, I think, has always been very important to me, and I got that from working for my first company when I did that. And at that time I was just doing illustrations, like I said, in gouache of airplane interiors. It wasn't design work, but there were some other young designers were there, and it was one of the other younger designers that said that to me. And he was like, I know you're just doing illustration work right now. I said, but just believe in yourself and you'll get to do design work. You're good at what you do, and just give it time. So that aspect. And then the other thing, which I heard from when I was at Avia, and it was unfortunately from the person who came in as the design director that none of us really got along with. But his thing was, whatever you're doing, however you're doing it, always do it to the best of your ability. Don't cut corners, even if it takes you an extra day. Put the time in that needs to be put in to have people look at what you're doing so they can understand it. And I use the same philosophy when I would talk to students about drawing stuff. Drawing your initial sketches are great, but if you want somebody to really get excited about what you're working on, you need to spend a little more time with your drawing and render it or color it in a way, whether it be in Photoshop or with your markers, so that you can bring it to life more, where people can get excited about it. If you don't spend that extra time, two things happen. One, the visual nature of what you're trying to show somebody, the idea doesn't come across as well. People won't believe you. People won't get excited about it and won't want to take it forward. And I know that for a fact with a really good friend of mine who, back when I was working at Avia, we had hired. He left, when we all left Avia back then, he actually went to go work for Nike, and he was working for Nike when I started consulting there. He was actually my boss or liaison, because he was in charge of myself and another designer that when we were doing all the kids product for Nike. Mm-hmm. When we all left Nike, he was one of the people that left with me to go work for And1. I won't mention this person's name. He's a really good person, could design well. However, he didn't want to spend the time to learn new software. Or at that time, just started learning Photoshop. And it, like I said, for myself, it changed the way I design things because of the visual quality that I could put into a drawing to show somebody my idea. He was very much into just wanting to use markers and not spend that extra time. And his designs being accepted at And1 suffered because of that. The other designers, Rob and myself, we were both using Photoshop. Todd, that came in, another designer, he was still using markers more. He used Photoshop a little bit, but his designs were simple enough that it was easy enough to understand. Peter, the other guy's stuff was going, he was the marketing person that he was working with had a little harder time reading his drawings. And because they didn't have that same quality that ours did from a presentation standpoint, they just wanted to, they were like, that's not right. Keep coming up with more ideas. So he was getting very frustrated because the stuff that he was doing, not that it was bad by any means, it just didn't have the same visual quality when he was presenting the ideas to them, for them to go, yeah, that we like what you're doing here and why let's do that. They liked his thinking, but they didn't like the visual nature of what they saw. And I'd spent some time talking to him, and I was like, I know you haven't spent that much time using Photoshop or anything, but you need to. I said, these guys will pay for your classes so you can do it, and it's going to increase the quality that you put into your drawings. I mean, you have good ideas, but the visual nature of how you're presenting them just isn't at the same level as what Peter and I are doing. I mean, Rob and I are doing. That's what they're getting used to, so they want to see that from you, and I think that'll help you take the ideas that you have and get them accepted better. He didn't want to spend the time. So look, as things went on, they ended up letting him go. And that was really unfortunate because he had a really good design eye and way of approaching things if he would have just put that extra time in.
Yeah.
So it's like adaptability, being willing to adapt to changing landscape.
Right. For me, I used to just do markers. Then I found out about Illustrator and started using that. And that changed a certain level of way I was doing stuff. But then I started learning how to use Photoshop. And what got me involved in Photoshop at the time was when I was at Nike, and they had a person come in, and they were just starting to get the idea of we need to do 3D. So they had a guy come in, and he was trying to teach us how to use Alias. And I was in part of that group. I thought this is the ticket. This is so cool. We didn't get far enough along where we all started using Alias, but it gave me the visual quality of kind of what I've started to do in Photoshop. And I was like, so going back and forth between the two, I was like, this is really cool. This is the way. This is the ticket. This is the future for how we need to do stuff. It took a decade later for me to get involved in 3D on my own to utilize it that way. Actually, probably more like 15. But how that changed me and how I worked was like night and day. It was I needed push. So as we go about our career, if we're aware of what new tools are coming about, and this is what kind of frustrates me a little bit now about AI, if I wanted to stay in the industry, I would have to learn a whole other tool. Not to say that I couldn't, but do I want to spend that extra time now at this point in my life after I've been doing what I've done for this amount of time? And I decided no. At this point in my life, I'd rather have a much simpler life and not have the stress level that this can involve. Because anytime you're having to create product for a company, even if it's your company, there's a certain amount of pressure and stress that comes along with that. Not all bad, not all good. It comes with the territory, the stress level of having to produce. And I know the use of AI has changed some of what that stress level is because of the speed at which it can produce, but I think it adds a whole different level of stress now because of everybody's starting to produce things with that kind of level of quality, visual quality of what they're seeing, but then there's a lot more that has to get figured out to really even be able to make what's being created. Yeah. So it creates a different level of stress, but that's always going to be there because the pressure's on when you're trying to do something that is going to find a way to make money for you or a company so the company can survive and keep going. So being aware of what technology is coming out in whatever industry you're involved in, I feel is important to stay in touch with. And if you want to be relevant in the industry, you need to push yourself and keep learning. And at this point, since I've stopped that, I don't want to try to get back into the industry because of that. Because of what that would entail for me, and I don't want that stress level anymore.
Maybe you could come on more as like a consultant, though, of like design direction and like philosophy. Maybe
that could be.
Yeah.
Hadn't really thought about it that way, but that would be another way back into the industry from a standpoint of not necessarily being the creative standpoint of creating the product, but helping to direct that and inspire
like
people.
Creative dojo.
Yeah, totally. That's kind of what my brother does. Yeah, he comes onto teams and he helps mold the thinking of these younger designers, and he did less product, but he still is part of the process, right. And he still gets to ride sort of the coattails of these younger kids who are learning these newer technologies, but he doesn't necessarily have to.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I think we talked about this earlier. When I used to teach, having somebody take something that you're showing them and just take it and run with it to what they then create from what you're showing them can be phenomenal and can be very, very rewarding. I just haven't taken that. I'm not sure if I will, but anything's possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I were to be in touch with somebody and that was of an interest for both parties, I would probably definitely consider it.
How is your design philosophy? Has it really molded over time, or are there some like overarching themes that you kind of always bring to the process, like to your specific process?
Yeah, I would say that hasn't really changed that much.
Okay.
I really like to keep things as simple as I can, and I want to make it purposeful. There are times where it's just an aesthetic, where you're just trying to create something that looks different. But even if I'm doing that from a concept standpoint, I'm still trying to keep it simple and trying to make it functional for what I'm doing. And I've always had the philosophy that good design doesn't have to cost an arm and a leg.
Yeah.
So the brand logo and entity of what a company is and what stigma may be around that is what drives a lot of the price for things, which I don't necessarily agree with. And that has never changed. But I don't think if something only costs $1 to make, then, I don't begrudge anybody, wanting to make a profit for what they're making, because that's how companies stay afloat and how people have a livelihood. But if it only costs $1 to make and you sell it for $100, I think that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
If it only costs you $1 to make, sell it for $2 or sell it for $3 to $5, whatever. Keep it in a way that makes everybody benefit. The company benefits because they're making profit off what they're doing. Consumer benefits because it's not costing them an arm and a leg, and they're getting something that's designed well and it works. So I've always tried to keep the philosophy that keep it simple, try to make it work, and try to make it affordable. Not everybody's that way, and I don't begrudge anybody, like I said, wanting to make money for what they're doing.
There's got to be a
but
reasonable...
I think it's like, should a BMW really cost what it does? Rolls Royce really cost what it does? I mean, are they putting, is it using gold thread when they're stitching the upholstery? And even if they were, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Why do something like that only to charge so much money for the handful of people that can buy it? I mean,
luxury companies like Louis Vuitton and stuff are now actually going through a backlash because the Chinese manufacturers basically pulled back the curtain. It was like, most stuff's made in China and they stamp a gold label in Italy or France and then charge you 600%, and now people are like, wait, we paid what for an Hermes bag?
And
people
I think
realizing
that especially today with what things in our society with inflation and what things are costing people today, you can't raise wages enough to compensate for the price of where things are going. So at some point it comes crashing down because people can't afford it, so people are not going to buy it. So the companies, they're getting all this inventory that's left. What happens? It all it starts to cannibalize on itself, which doesn't help anyone. So that's why I've always tried to have the philosophy that keep it affordable, design it well, so that when it wears out, we're going to want to come back to your company and buy another one.
Yeah.
The whole aspect that I studied that we were talked about when I went to college was the whole thing of planned obsolescence.
Yes, yeah.
And it floors me to no end today because it's gotten so much worse.
Yeah.
And I say that because I'll say it. I work at Home Depot now. I hang out and I design windows and doors for people, and I see that happening with people when they come in. From a cost standpoint, that they can't afford it, and so they don't want to do anything. So I think we have to find the right happy medium of how we do it, how we charge for it, so that people can make money and people can still buy it.
In today's manufacturing, and kind of in all manufacturing, there's like it has to be a hybrid of materials coming together when it comes to like recyclability, and like how most products, it costs more to tear it apart than to break it down and break it into a mono material. And so they're just like burning a lot of stuff, or like the regrind program at Nike. Is there ways that we can update our manufacturing to make that a little bit easier? Specifically, like I guess maybe speaking on like shoes or.
I would have to say probably yes. I don't have a specific answer from that standpoint. Okay. And the reason I say that, I'm going to relate this to something that Nike was doing back when I was still working for them. So again, this is 25 years ago. When anytime you have to make rubber parts, use the rubber part as the example, they have to take metal and make a mold. If that mold comes out the way they want it to, great. They can then just make the rest of the size run and they're not changing anything. They get the sample back, they look at it, it's not really what we wanted. We wanted more curves here, we wanted an extra piece here or there. So they have to now, that piece of metal that they used to make that mold goes where? Gets put into a pile. They have to make a new mold. So one of the things that Nike was doing while I was still there was creating a process that allowed them to make sample molds, and if the sample mold didn't work right, they could melt it down and use it again. They were using a combination of lead and nickel steel in such a way that they could make these sample molds and then melt it down and reuse it, where they couldn't out of the steel ones that they were doing previously. So just that alone was saving a ton of material from going into landfills or just being, piled up because I think they could melt it back down, but they couldn't reuse it the same way with steel.
Okay.
So that's just one simple example of things from a production standpoint that's going to use less material. But one of the things that Nike has done, with the regrind aspect of cutting off the upper and then using the rubber parts and regrinding it and selling it as a material that they can use for like playgrounds and other stuff like that, was a great program and still is to allow us to recycle our footwear. However, just how it's put together and what it is with all the glues and other materials, there's a lot of stuff that can't just be ground up. So I think with the manufacturing processes that they're using now from a welding standpoint for materials with less glue and more heat from a material standpoint, although I think there is still glue with some of what they're doing. There's got to be a way where that can then just be put under like I know this isn't realistic, but a UV light that's gonna take the welding and it's just gonna start to peel off from its material. Then they can take it and separate it.
Or like an
easier.
enzyme bath where they can start to break those materials apart.
So I don't have a solution or an understanding of what should be done necessarily, but I do think that a lot of companies are more aware of it. But they don't really have a right solution yet, other than taking the shoes back and regrinding them.
Right. Maybe the demand isn't high enough on the consumer side to really.
I think people are a little bit more savvy nowadays than they used to be about recycling and about products that are just getting thrown away. And I think a lot of people, especially here in the Northwest, we do a lot of recycling. From that standpoint. So I think that there still needs to be thought in terms of how we can take stuff apart and put it back together, or take it apart to recycle it and reuse things. Some things just don't necessarily work for how we're putting it together to take it apart to recycle it that way. So I think there's opportunity for that. I know that there's a gentleman that I used to work with at Nike, but he had started a company that was just making shoes out of recycled materials.
Cool.
Totally.
Wow.
Only he's gone on to do some other things now, but I thought that was a really great way of going about it. Any material that was being used on the upper was all recycled. And it was a simple enough design that it could be sort of stripped off the outsole and recycled easier to go back. It left the design language and aesthetic was a little bit lower from that standpoint because of how he was trying to go about it, and he was limited to some of the materials. You couldn't get some of the nice materials that you can that are just freshly made from a factory. So I think there's a lot more opportunity for companies to take that and run with it and do something better. None of what we make here today is here in the United States. I say none. There are some things that are made here in the States from a footwear standpoint, but majority of everything is overseas. So how we go about that, I think, is going to change the landscape of our environment. Excuse me. If you think about, I don't know if you guys have ever been to China,
No.
but when you go to another country that does all the production for all of what we design here in the States, it has dramatically changed their environment from a health standpoint. I mean, it's gray all the time.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I mean, when you see blue sky, that's a rarity.
Yeah. Or water that's like different rainbow colors of chemicals.
Yeah. So the production and things that have happened to their country based on all the manufacturing that moved there over the last number of decades has dramatically impacted their environment. So I think for things to come back to be produced here in the United States, especially with all the tariffs and other things that we hear going on right now with the change of presidency, I think people will need to be very smart about how they're going to go about retooling if we're going to be producing things here in a way that's better for everybody.
Sort of like a careful what you wish for. You might be bringing stuff back home.
Bringing stuff back here from a manufacturing standpoint, I think, is a great idea.
Yeah.
I mean, our country's GDP has gone to zero because we're just blue collar workers designing stuff where everything's made elsewhere. And I think there's a gentleman who I don't know if you guys are aware of. I forget his name. His company is called Texas Metal. Okay. And he's a welder by trade, growing up, and he can draw some, and he does all custom car work. Okay. He's out of Houston, Texas, but they do some phenomenal stuff. But here's a person that he can draw what he wanted to do to reshape a car, but he can make it. Right. He's got the people there, they're taking bending metal tubing and welding it, creating brand new chassis for vehicles so they can lower them and raise them, big wheels, all this stuff that goes into them. And here's a person that you can tell loves what he does, makes it functional, makes it aesthetic, makes a ton of money. I mean, I think the starting price for any work that he does is like $175,000.
Yeah.
Or 200,000. That's your starting point.
I'm sure there's a waiting list
Yeah.
too to get in the door. Even.
Right. And they have a TV show called Texas Metal that they do. So it's a reality TV show. And I just clicked into it one day and I was just like, oh my God, this stuff is phenomenal what these guys are doing. What impressed me the most about it was just the quality of what they were doing and how they were doing what they were doing. They really cared about what they were doing and they wanted it to be unique. And they weren't afraid to rebuild a whole new chassis for something that was going to have to be able to tow a certain amount of weight and do whatever. And they've got people that they're making new consoles and stuff with wood and Bondo, and they're covering them. They've got these upholstery guys doing all the stuff that covers it. It's phenomenal. If you ever get a chance, I'm sure there's YouTube videos out there.
Yeah.
But the reason I bring him up is here's somebody that is working in an industry that we all like. They're doing things uniquely in a way that nobody else is doing. They work and they look great. So it just gives you an appreciation for just the human craftsmanship and quality that can be done. And that's being done right here in the United States.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that having production here in the States is a bad thing by any means. But I think we need to be smart about how we do it so we don't, one, like we talked about earlier, it can't be, a car that you're doing and it's, a $200,000 car. Unless you're one of these rich movie star people that he's doing work for,
right,
rebuilding these cars that can afford that. So it has to be, we have to think about how we're producing stuff and how we're going to hire people to help run factories and do things that still make money and people can afford to buy what they're producing, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the sort of rocky boat that we're on right now, where Trump is trying to bring production back here in the States, but it takes a while to retool back up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then it needs to be done in a way that's cost effective for everyone.
One way that I could see that working is if the design industry as a whole kind of took, at least for shoes, I guess, because there are like some small companies like Rancourt in Maine that make moccasins and loafers in the old way. So it's employing a whole staff of people that are like basically cobblers from the ground up. They can do everything, remake them, everything like they've done 100 years. But if the shoe design industry basically took the approach you did with the Romanov shoe, where you're streamlining the process with going really 3D heavy, where you're skipping all the steps of having to make tons of molds and tons of iterations, where they could all do what you do with that, where like the first sample comes out and I'm like, this is about ready to go. Like that would save a lot of time and manufacturing costs and chemicals and all that stuff,
Cuts your timeline down, cuts down on a lot extra the samples and money that gets spent on it, the added materials. When I was at Nike, that was one of the things that we were starting to talk about, and it was a big challenge to try to convince an industry and people to do things differently. In that sense, they're like, well, and certain things, if it's just a herringbone shape, you don't need a 3-dimensional drawing for that outsole.
Yeah.
So certain things don't need it, but in combination with the contouring and other things that are going on with it, it might make sense. This product was only done in 2D, and so I was actually pretty pleased with how well it came out as a first round sample in that sense, with not doing anything in 3D, but it was simple enough that worked. But that's not usually the case. So to that standpoint of changing the industry and the way you go about it, can save a lot of money.
Yeah.
Can also streamline the process. It's just getting people on board, and that's...
You should do a TED Talk. Ted Portland.
He's coming up, actually. I think
bring that shoe and your sketches and do a TED Talk. I'm sure all the people...
Never thought about that.
Why not?
There's a lot more footwear design people out there besides myself in this part of the country that could do similar work or have similar ideas that I do that have done more or less than what I've done. A good friend of mine, Don, came from Nike, Adidas, and Damon came from Nike because I was there with Damon in cross training. So, but to that point, there's definitely a plethora of talent in the Northwest from a footwear design standpoint. That there's a lot of us that could give good TED Talks from that standpoint. Some probably a lot better than me or worse than me, but there's a good chunk of us out here in this part of the country that have been involved. I did want to mention one thing that you have down here as a question, and it's how do I play and stay curious? That's a very that goes along with inspiration when we're talking about nature and stuff like that. But for me personally, play is a big thing. Just finding ways to unwind without having to use drugs or alcohol, kind of like that. Which not to say I'm condoning any of those, but that's not the only reason to play or only way to play. I think finding things that we have as interests that can take our mind off what it is that we're trying to focus on from a creative standpoint allows us to be more creative. Play can be going out and working in the yard. Play can be playing video games. Play could be playing board games. Play could be painting. So it's when I think of play, I think of the things that I like to do that I find enjoyment in, that helps me to lower my stress level or takes my mind off of that I've been focused on trying to think of ideas for. And that's when a lot of ideas then start to pop into your head. It's like if you're struggling to coming up with something, go take a walk, go out and have lunch. Do something that makes you feel good, that takes your mind off that. And even though you're not thinking about it, you are thinking about it. So when it comes to play, that way, I always try to find different things that I know I enjoy. Reading a book that puts you in a different headspace in a story and gets involved in characters and that kind of thing can help a lot. And the other part of the question that was down here was, how do I stay curious? And I always want to learn new things. If we stop learning or stop asking questions about things that we see around us, I feel like we start to stagnate or we lose that edge of ourselves. So always wondering how something works or why somebody did something a certain way. Ask questions. Always ask questions. Yeah. That's how I stay curious, and that's how I stay a little bit more inspired. Just trying to ask questions. I don't always have answers, but asking questions, can be very thought provoking.
Well,
what else some lighter questions now?
Yeah.
Or we have some just maybe non-design ones. What do you think? Those lighter ones, or do you want to do a couple more?
If you have any.
What's like a daily like a week? What's a week gonna look like for you? Or like now that you're kind of removed from this high stress design life, and
so let's see. For me, like a sample day might be I get up in the morning. Since I've had my brain aneurysm, that was 2010, so quite a while ago. I go to bed earlier than I used to. I find myself getting tired, but I also get up early. So I get up around 6. And I've got 3 cats, and so they typically get up with me and start wandering through the house while my wife is sleeping. And one of the first things I like to do is just stretch. I start to move my body as you get older. I don't know if this happens to everyone, but it is for me. I get up in the morning, I'm a lot stiffer than I was when I went to bed. Yeah. So it takes a little bit to kind of work out the kinks. Yeah. So I get up, I'll stretch, do some push-ups. I've been involved in martial arts for a lot of years, so I'll do some forms and things like that to just move around. And then, my wife will get up, we'll sit, if it's nice out, we'll sit on the porch, drink some coffee, listen to the birds. I'm lucky enough to be on a piece of property that is very nice. I've got 5 acres, so I get to really experience nature. We see a lot of deer and that kind of thing. And after we're done drinking coffee, we may go back in and then we may do an actual workout, or we may just watch some TV or decide that we want to go out and have some breakfast. Then most days, if I come back home after going out for a bit, I'll do some yard work. Being on 5 acres, there's always stuff to do. Yeah. But mainly because of the space that I have, I like to spend as much time outside in nature as I can. I've got a lot of big fir trees on the property, so I'll just go out and hang out in the hammock. Or one of the things that I've always been involved in that I enjoy is RC. Yeah. So I have a number of battery and nitro gas powered cars. Whoa. Which are a blast to drive around, and it's been a blast to drive and build. All the cars and things that I have always been kits, so you basically have to build it from scratch. So if I feel like it, I might take the car out and run it around.
Do you GoPro any of it? Put a little GoPro
no,
on it?
I've never done GoProing with it. But along those lines, a friend of mine had not a cigarette boat. What are the ones with it's got the pontoon shapes on it. I can show you.
Moran.
Kind of catamaran, but it's a speedboat.
Yeah.
And he used to work for Snap-on, selling tools, and they gave him this RC boat. It's a water-cooled engine.
Okay.
It makes the coolest sound. So my friend had never used it. It was still sitting in the box, and I met him, and we were talking about it one day, and he showed me. I was like, "Dude, we gotta take this out and try it." So we went and did one day, and I swear to God, we could not wipe the smiles off our faces for hours. We were just laughing and smiling so hard because of the sound that it made, the water stream that it kicked up, and driving around. It was so much fun. And then I've gotten involved in flying.
RC planes.
Yeah. So I had a trainer, which I busted up to hell. So now I need to get a different plane, because that one won't fly very well anymore. But that was always a lot of fun. Here in Washington, up at the Clark County Fairgrounds, they have a club that goes, and they have a runway, a 300-foot runway, and the space to fly in. So that's where I've gone up to fly. And there's a gentleman who runs it that has 10 jets. He's got a rotary wing and a fixed wing pilot's license. He was in the military. He's in mid-40s now, I guess. but these jets are phenomenal. I mean, a motor for one of these things is like $7,000. Yeah, and he's got 10 of these planes.
RC jet plane.
Yeah, RC jet plane. There's not a speck of dust on the thing.
Wow.
In his transmitter, it's got 3 transmitters. So if he's flying it and one fails, he can go to the backup. And if that backup fails, he's got another backup. Because the last thing he wants to do is lose one of his planes.
Right.
Well, it's like redundancy built across aviation. They always have something backing up.
Right. So, stuff like that's been a lot of fun as stuff to do outside of do the RC stuff as much as I would probably like to. Too much yard work.
You ever gotten into being somebody who loves to be outdoors, but also an artist? You ever got into plein air painting or any of the contests?
No.
Okay.
I've never done any of that.
Yeah, they do it out in the gorge about this time every year. They do a Columbia Gorge plein air festival, and people go out to Maryhill or something, and you're just out there for 3 days with other artists, and you're just painting scenes from the gorge. And I have a friend from McMinnville who goes out and does that, and it's just kind of like it's competition, but it's also this community of just artists. Hey, it's the gorge, it's great weather, let's just paint together.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I would like to do something like that.
Yeah.
Years and years and years ago, I did a weekend workshop. It wasn't Longview, but it was somewhere north of here, and I'd never painted outside.
Yeah.
And done that way, so that was cool. I got to do some paintings of just we got to a park somewhere, and everybody's drawing and painting different things, but all that kind of community thing. It wasn't a competition, but it was a weekend workshop. Somebody teaching it, and that was back when I was just embarking more on my watercolor stuff. So that's always fun to do. Now, I've just experimented over the last couple of years, and I haven't done any the last 2 years now. With Procreate on my iPad, I was able to download some watercolor brushes and papers. So what I'm doing now in a digital form looks just like a watercolor.
Yes.
It's digital. It's pretty cool. So I'm starting to embark more on that.
Yeah, you can print it then on watercolor paper.
Yeah, then I can print it on watercolor paper or even regular paper, but it's got the texture of watercolor paper.
It's incredible.
So that's been a new thing for me. I like experimenting with that. A friend of mine that I used to work with at Home Depot, unfortunately, it would have been late winter. He got into a bad motorcycle accident, and he's only just gone home from rehab now a couple weeks ago. But I had no idea he was also an artist. So I went to go visit him up at the hospital to see how he was doing, and we got to talking, and we both realized that we were both artists. He used to work in the paint department at Home Depot, and he's left to go work for Miller Paint now, basically mixing paint for those guys for commercial projects and stuff. But he had never tried doing watercolor stuff or anything with Procreate, so we've been talking a lot. I gave him the brushes that I had, and so he's really experimenting on that. And we're going to get together once he's able to. We'll probably come out to my property, or we'll go someplace, and we'll just sketch and paint outside. So I haven't had anybody like that in my life since I was growing up. My best friend.
Yeah.
Man, it's so important having close knit community like that as you get older. It's so easy to push them away with work and stuff, But that's one beautiful thing about this podcast, just getting to just converse with people and know their lives better and laugh and smile and stuff. It feels good.
Sure.
It's good for the soul.
I mean, having you guys invite me over here for this today has been great. I've always enjoyed reconnecting with people that I've had as students and just seeing where their lives are at, and it's nice to see people progress and take hold of their lives.
Well, I've always respected and enjoyed you just as a teacher and a friend, and my design journey and academic art school journey was definitely kind of like this. It's a winding road, but you were always one of the kind of the beacons when I was in school of somebody I knew who I could just, the classes were always very serious, but I knew that you put your heart and soul into teaching, into giving back to the community, and everything we ask you just gave us the honest, real deal. Which I think sometimes in school you get kind of this rose-colored glasses, oh, it's gonna be like this, and then it's nice to have a teacher who's fair and honest and be no, this is what you need to put into it, and this is what you get out to it, and always sharing that.
You can't make somebody do something, but if you don't have honesty with somebody when they're looking for answers, they're never going to grow, and they're never going to understand what it is that they're doing right or wrong. And that was one of the things that I felt I wish I had when I was in school was teachers that were honest with me, and especially even in the workplace. Without that level of honesty, people don't need to be cruel.
Yeah, it's an encouraging honesty. It's make you a better person, better artist.
If you're doing something and it's not quite right, if I just blow smoke up here, and say, oh, no, you're doing a great job. Yeah. That's not helping you. Mm-hmm. And it's giving you a false sense of security in terms of your skill set. Yeah. So I would always try to be honest in a way that was constructive for people.
Yeah.
So that they could, they might not like to hear what I'm saying. That's really not very good. But if you do this and this and this, and you spend a little time with it, it will be good.
Yeah.
It's your choice if you want to spend that time with it. But I'm not going to tell you it's good if it's not.
Yeah.
But and I want you, and I see you have the skills to get there. You just have to put that extra time in if you want to. Otherwise, you're going to stay as good as you are right now. And nobody wants to, if they're getting the response of something that's not very good, they're not going to want to stay there. They're going to want to hopefully help themselves improve. But not everybody wants to. A lot of people are like, I don't care. That's that person's prerogative to decide how they want to be about it. But without a level of honesty, you're never going to grow and understand.
Yeah.
And so I've always tried to have that philosophy in my whole life.
And definitely, and I think also because of that's what you brought as a teacher, especially like, I don't know about you, but there were a lot of classes I took where after looking back, I'm like, man, that was a waste of money. But every class I took with you, I was like, money well spent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Thank
it
you.
was like definitely an investment that paid dividends still,
I always felt like
And had fun too. It's always fun.
I always tried to do both, make it fun and give it a good learning curve for it.
Yeah.
If one of the things that I really got out of my schooling was when a teacher did demonstrations. At Syracuse, there was a lot of philosophy of how to go about stuff. And it wasn't until actually further down in the program, I think it was probably might have even been our last year in the industrial design program, where they actually had a working professional from the industry come in and really teach marker rendering.
Really, that far along?
Yeah, that far along. It's not that we weren't shown how to use markers, but it's different than having somebody do a demo and explain things to you and work with you that way. And when I saw it after that class, I was like, if I ever get to teach, and of course this was way back when I was in college, it didn't really dawn on me until much later on, because I was thinking, that's a great way to teach. Just showing people how to do it versus just talking it. Showing it. And so that's why in the classes that I taught, I always wanted to do demonstrations and have you guys kind of do it with me.
Yeah, vividly remember those.
Sketch by numbers, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But it would allow you to do it yourself, see how I'm doing it, and try to emulate and learn. But without, in the cases of a lot of things, it's just steps to go through to really bring it to fruition. You have to kind of do this first, then you do this, and you kind of build on it so that you can do all of what you want to do to make it exciting to look at and have a good visual quality. So that's all I was doing. I was just taking you guys through the steps.
Defying the whole
It's
process,
kind of I was like, oh gosh, you look at the final rendering of that car, and I go, well, you start here. We're going to start with this basic color, and we're going to do it this way. Then we're going to do the next step. And then we get, finally we get to the wheels. Like finally, now we get to do something that's going to make it, really look like the car. So for a lot of what we do, there's a certain skill level that you as an individual need to have, a willingness to learn and put the time in to create something. But then, enjoy it. Have fun with it. If you're not enjoying it, then maybe it's not the right profession for you. I would encourage anyone with whatever they're going to be spending their time doing as an adult, to be spending, a lot of years doing it, is to find something that you can enjoy.
Yeah.
The last thing you want to do is spend 30 some odd years doing something you can't stand. I mean, that sucks. That would suck.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, and a lot of people are that way. Not everybody needs to be doing something creative that way. I mean, some people love to cook, so working at a restaurant or even working at a place like even a fast food place, Chipotle. If I enjoy cooking and I know people are enjoying the food I'm cooking, that makes me happy. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with doing anything that makes you happy as long as it's not hurting anybody. That's always been one of my big tenets in life is, do no harm. Right. So to that point, my wife really convinced me that when I started teaching, she's like, you really need to be more honest with your students. Find a way to be clear. Don't be inappropriate and rude to anyone, but be honest. That's how they're going to learn. I took that to heart because that's really what made it, I think, a big difference in the classes that I taught and the students and the quality of the work that they were able to do. Yeah, was that because in a lot of cases, most of the teachers didn't do demos. No. With how you go about doing whatever it is that you're doing. I think there needs to be the right happy medium, so just like doing something online in classes, that's one way of going about anything, but actually having somebody there as you're doing it to help you spot the mishaps or how you're going about something can really help you grow faster. Nothing wrong with online learning, but I do think that especially when it comes to something that is a hands-on thing, it's helpful to have somebody there that you can talk to right away. Cooking, cleaning, doesn't matter what it is, building, watching a video on how to build a doghouse is one thing. Having somebody right there next to you that's doing the same thing, and you go, hey, how are you hammering that? Or, what are you doing for your... Oh, okay, I see. Okay, I gotta watch the video 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
I'm still not sure, but I think I'll try it.
You're like
Yeah.
YouTube University. You keep rewinding
Yeah.
the video.
I like it.
Well, unless you have anything, we'd both love to thank you for
thank you so much for
doing
everything.
this interview. And
Appreciate the opportunity
Yeah.
to come in and talk to you
And I
guys.
definitely think you should do a TED Talk, especially with this whole like made in Old Town thing where they want to
Yeah, have you heard about that?
bring.
No.
Yeah.
Bringing manufacturing down into an old town. They got like a
Yeah.
bunch of funding to bring like footwear and like they have a whole like 8
Yeah.
campuses they're trying to build.
Really?
Tons of
Yeah.
manufacturing, like 3D
Wow.
manufacturing. It's basically you bring like big and small companies. The big probably wouldn't obviously come in because they wouldn't want to like share their intellectual property. But the smaller people, they have like all the facilities from like design to manufacturing to material selection to marketing, and you
Wow.
can get it all done
Yeah.
in that area.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, but there's
Super
like a
exciting.
future that they want to build, and some of the stuff you talked about, would, I think, be valuable to like. I think some of the people running there are more like the tech bro kind of people, like the people who used to run some of the 3D like Hylos and stuff, where getting some of this wisdom with that new technology and stuff. I think who knows.
And you said Hylos. That's the guy who's
Yeah.
like heading the project.
Yeah.
Levi, I forget his last name, but
Yeah,
I'll have to
Levi
look it
or
up and
Eli.
see.
Yeah, it's really, really, really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, when it comes to one last thing
Yeah.
when it comes to producing things here in the States, Keen as a company, I mean, they have their office in Northwest Old Town, not Old Town, in the Pearl area.
yeah,
They produce most of their stuff in China. However, they have a facility on Selbiger Island
right.
where they can do small production runs. They can basically make a whole shoe.
Oh wow.
The outsole, everything that they need to, they can make it there. So I have a feeling companies like Keen are going to start to push things very quickly from that standpoint here.
Yeah,
So maybe they'll get involved in what you're talking about here from Old
Yeah.
Town as well. But
yeah.
that's a very interesting new development that I wasn't aware of.
Yeah, it'd be super cool to see it like actually happen. I went and I toured the facilities and everything, and it was just a bunch of empty buildings. I really believed the dude like when he was talking about like the ideas and the vision, and I was just like, man, I can see it. Like I'm in the magic right now. It was
Right.
really cool.
Well, the whole Northwest has been a mecca for footwear design.
Yeah.
With the companies that are here, they've brought a lot of talent to the Northwest. Taking it further to that effect, with what you're talking about from that development standpoint, that could change things a lot for the companies that are bigger that do things, because there'll be a lot of people coming up that want to do things and that don't want to be at the big corporation.
Yeah, it'd
Yeah.
be cool to like unlock all this innovation and not keep it behind closed doors
Right.
and share secrets. Like,
The
that's
whole
a-
idea of open source ideas, I think, has a lot of merit for how we can develop things today that can take things a lot further.
Yeah.
When people are willing to not be like this with it and share it, I think it will change the whole landscape of what gets produced and how it gets produced.
Community over competition.
Yeah.
That should be a slogan.
Yeah, I love it. We're gonna make it a T-shirt.
Yeah, there we go. I like it. Community over competition.
Yeah. Well, thank you for everything, Larry. Appreciate
You're
you.
welcome, guys. Thanks a lot. Appreciate the time.
Yes.